Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Growing up fast was something the Pistons' second-round pick in '86 knew plenty about.
Well, me and my mother didn't really have the greatest relationship. She never even came close to saying, I love you. She couldn't show love because all she knew was abuse. I seen my mother being beaten. I seen my mother being dragged across the front lawn, and this guy was trying to run over with a lawnmower. We saw it so much, we were so used to it. She would come home mad sometime, and then if we do anything wrong, she would really just... She really try to whoop our ass. It's very easy. So, we didn't understand why, but it's like, okay, you know what? Whatever, man. There was no direction for me. As far as what I want to do in life, well, I had nothing.
When he finished high school, Dennis Rodman went to work as an airport janitor in Dallas. And then he grew 7 inches.
I played basketball like 8-9 hours a day. All day long, man. All day long. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just playing.
Being 6'7" was enough to get on the team at Southeastern Oklahoma State, an NAIA school. Rodman was a 22-year-old freshman.
It's like it just came natural to me when I got tall. It just came, all at once.
In college, in front of like 2,000 people. Every time I do anything, I do like this. I was just so happy just to be there. People would get pissed. Like, I'm not trying to show you off. I'm just so happy, so excited. My life was changing.
When Dennis came in, it was second round pick, okay, big deal. But there was definitely something special about him. He had a gear of speed that nobody's ever seen before in the NBA.
Rodman celebrating as he does. Fists in the air.
He played basketball like he was trying to get away from something that he never wanted to go back to. He rebounded with a ferocity that just didn't make any sense.
Rodman!
Woo! He was playing basketball like he wanted to get a white woman. He was feverishly rebounding, Dennis Rodman was. Context of white supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, October 26th, 2018. So I have been told. Before I get to any commentary on our book study for the evening, I do want to make sure to remind myself, listeners, live and archived, the reason that we are reading this particular book is because of the passing of Pamela Harris. Investor in the C.O.W.S, guest on the C.O.W.S many times, called in numerous times to just share her views or ask questions when guests were on the program, both white guests and non-white guests. She shared tons of our content online in her writings and throughout her books and what have you, just shamelessly supported the context of white supremacy, she is missed. I'm sure that is a sentiment that is felt by many listeners. We compartmentalize. All of that is true, valid, and should be remembered. As for the text that we are reading, Black Love is a Revolutionary Act. This is our 9th and final session. Worst book that I have ever read. I've had a week to think on it, and I think the question was raised because the progression has been Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, Angie Thomas, The Hate You Give, and now Black Love is a Revolutionary Act. It just keeps getting worse and worse. The reason that this is worse than The Hate You Give, in my view, is that, again, this is nonfiction. So at least in my view, you have different standards, more stringent standards about what you expect in a book. And, you don't have to be accurate, quote unquote, about things in a fictional account. You can make up whatever you're doing. But I have expectations about accuracy in a work that is nonfiction. And this book is regularly inaccurate, highly inaccurate on material that's being presented. That's huge. Misattributing a quote to Mr. Fuller that's going to be used to name call black males is so astronomically incorrect. And that's one, I think it is hugely significant. I have not, and I looked on Amazon, I read dozens of reviews for this book. I did not see anyone who noted, wait a minute, Mr. Fuller's term is not showcase blacks. Mr. Fuller does not use that term. The term he uses is racial showcasing. I didn't see anyone who picked up on, that, in my view, hugely important difference. And as I had time to think on it, to quote Dennis Rodman, that's why that audio segment was included, to quote Dennis Rodman repeatedly in the book. You can quote Dennis Rodman to the period, to the apostrophe, but you can't even quote Mr. Fuller directly. This book was published in 2011. Mr. Fuller had done audio segments and had the Word Guide published at that time. Those books have the term racial showcasing in them. He has discussed those topics repeatedly. You couldn't even take the time for someone who is revered, allegedly, to accurately quote the term. And then you use this misquote to name call black males exclusively. Like, oh my gosh. In addition to what I said before about the references being very inadequate, to say the least, just random websites. Sometimes the website is not even included. Many issues. You could take your pick. Name calling, flagrant violation of the 10 stops that Mr. Fuller has talked about. Just that is such a massive contradiction to say that Mr. Fuller was a huge influence, or Dr. Welsing was a big influence, where these individuals talked all the time about not name calling other black people, and then to engage in and, in my view, glorify name calling other black males exclusively. Mercifully, we will come to the end. Look for the black misandry. It's going to come up again as we go down the stretch of the book. Feverish black males. That there was Dennis Rodman included at the beginning. I included him again because he was included so many times as a representation of black male pathology. There's a victim of white supremacy there. You heard what he said about his black mother. All she knew was abuse. All she knew was abuse. She didn't know black love. All she knew was abuse. That's a victim of white supremacy, Dennis Rodman's mother. Said he saw someone try to run over her with the lawnmower. Victim of white supremacy. I would hope a part of quote unquote black love includes saying, well, maybe if I could stop, from being angry or frustrated with you, maybe if I could be patient enough to kind of step back and kind of see, oh, okay, this is a victim of white supremacy. I see maybe why you might be functioning in that. Even if you are never mind. Context of white supremacy. It is all done. Black Love is a Revolutionary Act, Chapter 43. Let's get to it.
The Cure, a Black Love Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. Gil Scott Heron. Chapter 43. Black Love is a Revolutionary Act. What is a Black Love Revolution? A Black Love Revolution is a transformation of black minds, bodies, and spirits. It is a fundamental change in the way we think, speak, and act towards one another. Black love is cherishing our ancestors by acknowledging their pain and vowing to never let our history repeat itself. Black love is having empathy for those who are still suffering in a nation whose riches were built on our sweat, blood, and tears. Black love is unity, standing together, protecting one another, and recognizing that we are in this together. Black love is belonging to each other again. Black love is a return to the kind of love we once had for one another before we were robbed of the knowledge of self. A Black Love Revolution is the love between a black man and his black woman, between a parent and a child, a sister and a brother, a neighbor or co-worker, an acquaintance or a stranger, and a deep, abiding love for self. Is black love taboo in a white supremacy society? Absolutely. If the authors have accomplished nothing else with this book, we hope we have proven beyond a doubt that there are powerful forces that are determined to destroy the bond between the black male and black female. Why is black love taboo? The answer is simple. Black love equals black procreation equals black population increase equals black unification equals the end of white supremacy. Which leads to another critical question. Who will control the world's most valuable resources, the original owners or the plunderers and invaders? Africa is the world's second largest continent after Asia. Africa has 70% of the world's cobalt, 90% of its platinum, 40% of its gold, 98% of its chromium, 70% of its tantalite, 64% of its manganese, 1/3 of its uranium, 70% of the world's coltan. Most mobile phones contain coltan, 30% of the world's diamond reserves, the world's largest exporter of bauxite, the largest undiscovered oil reserves in the world, and the birthplace of the most fertile soil and the most fertile people on the planet. Our enemies know the truth. When you invade a place for its resources, you wipe out the indigenous population. Those are the rules of any colonization. Movie Battle Los Angeles, 2011. In the 2009 movie 2012, planet Earth experiences a series of catastrophic natural disasters that threaten to wipe out humanity, sparking a massive secret project to build giant arks that will be able to withstand the coming floods. The only people who can afford a ticket on the arks are wealthy whites. At the last minute, a small number of non-whites and poor whites are allowed on board. Where are the arks filled with the last survivors on Earth headed? The only place on Earth where survival is possible, Africa. This movie left one critical question unanswered. If the majority of survivors are wealthy whites, what are their plans for the African people who already inhabit and own the only continent left standing? The answer is obvious. There is no mystery, the signs are everywhere. Yet our enemies have managed to deceive us with their lies and false promises of racial equality, while the mass destruction genocide of the African man and woman, the original owners of the most valuable land and resources on earth, is being planned even as these words are being written. Our enemies know whoever controls Africa's wealth controls the entire world. The most powerful act a black male and black female can commit is to love one another. And we can start by forgiving each other. What if tomorrow came and white people had no power over black people? What if we woke up tomorrow and the world was a place where whites had no power over black people? What if we lived in a world where black people generated our own power, pumped our own water, grew our own food, built and ran our own schools, manufactured our own products, policed our own communities, controlled our own elections, owned and managed our own corporations, land, resources, cities, towns, states, and nation? What would happen if black people didn't need anything from white people because we could supply whatever we needed for ourselves? Would blacks beg whites to validate and include us? Would black males put white females on a pedestal? Would black females give white males more respect than black males? Would any black person ever look in the mirror and think, I'm ugly because I don't look more white? If this world came into existence tomorrow, would we change the way we think, feel, and act towards whites, towards other black people, and towards ourselves? If the answers to all the above is yes, this should be a wake-up call to every black man and woman on the planet to change what we think, say, and do today. Epilogue: A Still Perfect Marriage. Chapter 44: A Still Perfect Marriage with a Happier Ending. The perfect couple. They met in college through mutual friends. The moment he saw her, he knew she would be his wife. After 20 years of marriage and 3 children, they still laugh at each other's jokes and cuddle like teenagers in darkened movie theaters. They laugh, too, whenever their friends and family call them the perfect couple because no marriage was perfect. Secretly, they are proud to wear the label because their union had survived the marital storms that sank much weaker vessels. As a daily reminder, an engraved plaque hangs on the wall above their bed: "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The unthinkable happens. On a cold, moonlit night in their quiet suburban neighborhood, a shadowy figure slips in through the partially open kitchen window. The peacefully sleeping couple is startled awake by a flashlight shining in their faces. The armed intruder, a powerfully built man in a white Halloween mask, orders the couple to strip naked, growling obscenities as the wife reluctantly complies. There is the harsh rash of a zipper as the gunman loosens his pants. The husband and wife exchange a look of dread, but there is a resolve in their faces, in their eyes, that remains unspoken. As the gunman moves towards the wife, she slaps her right hand over her heart and collapses to the floor in a dead faint. The armed intruder is caught off guard, since this wasn't part of his script. The husband lunges at the gunman. The 2 men are locked in a dead grip, one trying to hold on to his gun, the other fiercely determined to take it. The wife jumps to her feet, grabs a pair of scissors from the dresser, and drives the tempered steel deep into the gunman's back. Shrieking with pain and rage, the intruder drops his weapon. The gun slides across the hardwood floor. Both men dive for it. The husband reaches it first, but is tackled by the gunman, who is younger and more muscular. The wife, a can of mace in hand, aims the spray right into the eye holes of the mask. The gunman screams. Stumbling, bleeding, and half blind, he rips the white mask off. The husband scrambles to his feet, aims, and pulls the trigger. The sound is deafening, rattling the window panes and filling the room and their nostrils with the acrid smell of gunpowder. The intruder is sprawled on the floor, eyes wide open. The entrance wound is a round hole the size of a dime in the center of his forehead. Shaking, the wife dials 911, her eyes raising from the dead man on their bedroom floor to her husband, who is walking toward her. Their eyes meet, and to her surprise, he is smiling. It is a grim smile, but one filled with satisfaction for a job well done. He did what every man would do, should do, under the circumstances: protect his wife, his woman, his children, and his home. That's why they had discussed, had even rehearsed, what they would do if a stranger ever violated their home. By the time the wife hangs up the phone, she's smiling too, a brittle one edged with pride. Her husband had done what every woman expects her man to do under the circumstances: protect his wife, his woman, his children, and his home. And she had done what every husband expects his wife, his woman, to do: to have his back and to risk her own life and safety, if necessary, to back him up. While they wait for the police to arrive, they stood by the bed, hands clasped together, staring at the plaque above their bed. Their God had never abandoned them in their time of need, and he would not abandon them now. No regrets. It was a terrible thing that happened on that terrible night, but they had made a silent pact that they would not cry, moan, or wring their hands with regret. There would be no false sadness or hollow statements about the tragic death of another human being. Because the intruder wasn't human, not in either of their eyes. He was a wild, vicious animal that had to be put down, a victimizer, a rapist, and a thief of peace who would have viciously murdered a man whose only crime was protecting his wife and children. They were relieved and ecstatic that the armed intruder in the white mask was dead. Had they left him alive, even if he had been caught, convicted, and sent to prison, they would have to look over their shoulders for the rest of their lives, knowing revenge was always a possibility once his sentence was served. Who knows how many innocent victims have been spared by taking one depraved life? This was not a time for tears or sadness. They had great reason to rejoice. They still had the perfect marriage. Try to imagine a time when no victimizer, rapist, or thief of peace would be able to beat, torture, strip naked, fondle, rape, or murder our daughters, sons, mothers, fathers, wives, or husbands in front of our eyes because we will give our lives to stop that from ever happening again. And if you can't imagine that, try imagining this. You will never stand naked on any slave auction block or prison intake line, and you will never put yourself or your loved ones or your neighbor or your neighbor's children in harm's way again, because you are them and they are you, because we will belong to each other again. A DNA-connected community of African souls that reach from continent to continent and all over the world. To stop black gender wars, we must stand together and shout in a 2 billion strong African voice, never again. I freed thousands of slaves. I could have freed thousands more if they had known they were slaves. Harriet Tubman, 1820 to 1913. Black Love, Counter-Warfare Marriage. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the faith that we have made our position unassailable. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, 544 to 496 BC. Black Love, Counter-Warfare. Chapter 45. Black Love, Counter-Warfare, Solutions and Suggestions. What is counter-warfare? Counter-warfare is a strategy of nonviolent resistance to the system of racism, white supremacy, the most sophisticated mind game ever designed. In self-defense, non-whites must develop an equally powerful counterintelligence to neutralize the mind games by changing the way we think, education, changing our behavior, constructive actions. 13 counter-warfare suggestions. Number 1, recognize we are at war. Number 2, admit we have a problem, menticide. Number 3, become knowledgeable about the system of white supremacy. Number 4, stop keeping white people's secrets. Number 5, stop obeying the white traffic cop inside of our head. Number 6, the theory of non-participation. Number 7, minimize conflict, stop name-calling and fighting. Number 8, maintain a psychological distance from white people. Number 9, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Number 10, show black love freely, openly, and publicly. Number 11, adopt the mantra of black unity. Number 12, 33 rules of disengagement. Number 13, become a leader of one. The counter-warfare strategies put the focus where it belongs, on what black people can and must do, not on what white people might or should do. We did not get in this terrible condition overnight, and we will not resolve our problems overnight. We cannot afford to waste any more time talking about what white people should do for us and find a way to do for self. If we need better schools for our children, we must pool our resources and create better schools. If we need more jobs, we must pool our resources and create our own jobs. We cannot afford to wait 1 second longer for someone else to end racism. We have already waited 500 years. It is time to stop begging, marching, and protesting. It is time to stop expecting the white elite to eliminate the white supremacy system that was designed for their sole benefit. All we will get is what we have always gotten, the false appearance of real change. The real revolution takes place between our ears. As we watch the civil rights clock spinning backwards, it should be clear that despite all our progress, black people still control nothing in America, including the ability to rescue one black person off a roof after Hurricane Katrina. Once we become empowered, illuminated with knowledge of self and knowledge of how the system of racism, white supremacy works, we will attract other empowered individuals who seek real change, not the kind of change that is seen on television under the banner of a national convention. We must stop deluding ourselves that such false displays offer any real change. They do not. They are simply upgraded dog and pony shows to pacify, deceive, and exploit the masses. We know from history that black leaders who truly advocate real change are never rewarded, promoted, or given airtime by the same powerful elites who create created the system of injustice. Real change is not glamorous or pleasant. It has nothing to do with being popular, articulate, or presenting an attractive image. It does not happen while we sit in front of a television set or walk into a voting booth and push a button. The real change is hard, dirty, and dangerous work. Fortunately, none of the suggestions in this book are hard, dirty, or dangerous. They do not require money, special skills, talents, bravery, or bloodshed. In fact, most suggestions involve not doing something that wastes our precious time and money or that harms us individually or collectively. These recommendations, as well as the contents of this book, are a framework that the reader can adapt as he or she sees fit and decide what is beneficial, constructive, and useful, and what is not. No one, including the authors of this book, represent the voice or voices of authority. Strategy number 1, recognize we are at war. A quick summary of Black America's worsening dilemma. Black labor has become obsolete in America. In many inner cities, the menial, low-skilled, and low-paying jobs that poor blacks used to do and are still willing to do are farmed out for maximum profit to illegal slave labor. Automation, machines, and computers have eliminated the rest. In spite of record unemployment for blacks, estimated at over 35% in 2010, America is still importing unskilled and skilled non-white labor from Latin America and India. The picture for educated professional blacks in corporate America is just as dismal. Glass ceilings have turned into concrete. Union, good jobs, benefits, and guaranteed pensions are becoming relics of the past. As a result, the hard-won gains from civil rights and affirmative action over the last 40 years are being systematically wiped out. After 2 terms of the Bush administration's efforts, affirmative action is little more than a controversial and fraudulent memory that clearly ignored the fact that the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action were and still are white females. Black farmers have yet to receive compensation for stolen farmland and government discrimination. Blacks are losing land and houses at a record pace in dozens of predominantly black cities where gentrification, land grabs, subprime mortgages, reverse redlining, targeting black areas for fraudulent home loans, foreclosures and property taxes, and eminent domain schemes designed to force blacks out of major cities and out of their homes and communities. In predominantly black schools all across the country, black children are miseducated and undereducated by design, while many black schools are closing their doors for good. Black boys are being tracked into special education classes or non-college prep classes or expelled for minor offenses to deliberately destroy their intellectual potential and self-confidence. The unrelenting onslaught of white Hollywood via the buffoonery comedies, sitcoms, and reality shows is polluting the minds and morals of black youth. White decision-makers and their black puppets deliberately pair the black male with anyone but a black female in movies, TV shows, TV commercials, and rap videos to divide and conquer and demoralize the black male and female. Over 1 million black men and black women rot in penal institutions, many for nonviolent drug crimes, while white drug users of crack, powder cocaine, prescription drugs, and meth get intervention, drug treatment, fines, or a slap on the wrist for their illness. To add more injuries to the massive injuries inflicted on black America by America's criminal justice system, prison authorities callously turn a blind eye to the epidemic of inmate and guards raping other inmates. Rampant homosexuality flourishes in prisons where black males in their sexual prime are forced to live in cages with other sexually frustrated males. It is no accident that black ex-felons infected with HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C are deliberately released back into the black community without education, job skills, or medical treatment for their contagious diseases. It is undeniable that the white supremacy system and their white foot soldiers are waging a vicious war against black people on 4 levels: educational, economic, psychological, and reproductive. It is also increasingly clear that white America has no patience or sympathy for poor or uppity blacks and is rapidly and quietly building more prisons while it closes black schools in preparation for what? $104 million juvenile detention center to be built East Baltimore while city is closing predominantly black schools. Source, Our Weekly, November 11, 2010. What is white America's plan for black youth? The answer should be obvious. Strategy number 2, admit we have been damaged by 500 years of oppression and are still suffering from menticide. To be a white-identified black is menticide, the destruction of what should be a black-centered, self-respecting, and self-loving mindset. The late Dr. Bobby Wright, who publicized the term menticide, defined it as the deliberate and systematic destruction of a group's mind, with the ultimate objection being the complete extermination of the group. Scholar and author Dr. Mawalimu K. Bomani Baruti offers this explanation. When you willingly think and act out of someone else's interpretation of reality to their benefit and against your survival, it is a state of subtle insanity which has come to characterize more and more Africans globally. It is undeniable that the black community is having a moral and spiritual crisis that no amount of money or material things can heal. We have allowed our black heroes and role models to be chosen by the white media on the basis of fame and money, not on the content of their characters. We have gone from a people who would risk life and limb fighting for the rights of all black people to a people who are disconnected from the pain and suffering of our own kind. We claim to be black and proud, yet seldom pass up the opportunity to condemn and stereotype each other for the entire world to see. We ridicule our beautiful African features while denying that we secretly hate the man or woman in the mirror. We teach our children by example to dislike and disrespect themselves, and then look on in puzzled frustration as our black children increasingly choose the road to self-destruction and despair. If we are doing well economically, we blame those who have not been so lucky, even if we know the system of white supremacy will only allow a small minority of blacks to achieve the American dream. If we want to heal our black nation, we must put aside our false egos and beliefs and admit we are sick. Like any crack addict, blacks in America must kick our addiction to white supremacy crack and admit we have been programmed to see other black people and ourselves through condemning white eyes. It is time to tell ourselves the truth. Let truth become our drug of choice. Strategy number 3. Become knowledgeable about the system of white supremacy and our true status in it. If you do not understand white supremacy racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Neely Fuller Jr., 1971. Until we understand what white supremacy is and how it functions, we will not understand what is happening to non-white people all over the world. We can't create solutions until we understand the problems, the same way we can't build a house without building a foundation. What we will wind up with is a shaky, unsafe building that will topple when the first storm hits. In the Resources section, page 401, there is a list of books, CDs, DVDs, and websites that will increase your understanding of white supremacy so you will recognize how and when it is being practiced. Strategy number 4, stop keeping white people's secrets. Tell our children the truth about racism, white supremacy. Jewish parents know how important it is to teach their children about the Jewish Holocaust so their children will know they must be vigilant against their enemies. One reason so many black parents shy away from teaching our children about racism or slavery is we do not know enough about our history to teach anyone else. Strategy number 3. Once black parents understand how the system of white supremacy works, they will understand how important it is to make their children aware of what is happening and why it is happening to black people all over the world. We must stop pretending and lying to ourselves that we should let our children make up their own minds about race and prepare them for the psychological attacks they will face both inside the television, movies, and outside the home, the white supremacy system. If we do not prepare them, we should be prepared for our children to be psychologically devastated when the truth hits them square between their eyes. It is a crime to let another generation of black children come out into a racist society without preparing them for what we know they will face in the white world. Eliminate phrases like good hair, pretty light skin color, pretty light eyes, and bad nappy hair from your vocabulary. Do not allow anyone to degrade black people in front of your children and explain why you object to it. Encourage your children to question everything they see and hear, give them truthful answers, and let them express their opinions. Let them know there is no stupid questions, but you may not know all the answers. Black children are born with an abundance of intelligence until the media, educational system, racist whites, and unconscious black adults kill their confidence, self-esteem, and intellectual potential. Replace television watching and video games that do all the thinking with books, games, and building blocks, puzzles, and chemistry sets that will teach our children to think analytically and allow them to use their motor skills and creativity. If we want our children to compete intellectually with children from every part of the world, the time to prepare them is right now. Strategy number 5. Stop obeying the white traffic cop in your head. We must think first before we speak to, act against, or harm another black person. We must ask ourselves, why are we so quick to mistreat each other, but are so reluctant, afraid to stop whites from mistreating us? We must understand that anything that harms other black people helps the system of white supremacy maintain its power, which is why blacks are rewarded for betraying each other. We must ask ourselves, whose eyes am I using when I judge other black people? When we condemn other black people for being black, we are condemning ourselves. Before you speak or act, ask yourself, do my actions make me part of the solution or part of the problem? Will my speech or actions make this world a better, safer place for my children and grandchildren, or will my words and actions make things worse? Strategy number 6, the theory of nonviolent non-participation. Non-participation is the most powerful weapon we possess. We have the freedom to not participate in those things that demean or shortchange black people. This includes not spending our hard-earned dollars where they are not respected. For example, in 2007, at the biggest fashion events in New York City, Paris, and Italy, top American and European designers like Jill Sanders, Burberry, Bottega Veneta, Roberto Cavalli, and Prada had no black runway models. I am virtually never allowed to photograph black models for the magazines, fashion houses, cosmetic brands, perfume companies, and advertising clients I work for. Whenever I ask to use a black model, I am given excuses such as, black models do not reflect the brand's values. Fashion photographer Nick Knight. Despite the lack of black representation on the runways, in high fashion advertising, and behind the scenes of the fashion industry, blacks have plenty of representation at the cash registers when we collectively spend billions on designer clothing, accessories, shoes, and apparel. Utilizing the power of non-participation, we would stop begging or demanding to be included and stop buying where we can't work. No dialogue would be necessary. Our constructive actions would speak for themselves. A constructive and self-respecting response to the racism in the fashion industry would be, they do not have to hire blacks for their fashion shows. They have the right to hire or not hire whoever they see fit. They can do their thing and we'll do our thing. Just understand this thing cuts both ways. We don't have to include them in our shows or spend our money with them either. The Black Collective would then spend our fashion dollars with our black designers and turn their wonderful creations into our fashion status symbols. To take a page out of the white economic book, non-black designers could participate only if they hire blacks and advertise in black-owned media. We would refuse to participate or support any people, places, and things that do not respect our dollars and start circulating those precious dollars in our own communities. Strategy number 7, minimize conflict. Minimize conflict at home, at work, in public, and at all places. Avoid unnecessary contact with people who seek conflict with you. The powers that be use conflict to divide and conquer the black male and female. According to the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller Jr., there are 10 basic stops that help to eliminate racism and produce justice for all victims of racism. Number 1, stop snitching to get ahead of someone else. Number 2, stop name-calling. Describe what a person does or says rather than calling them a name. For example, instead of calling a person a liar, repeat what they said and say that what was said was not true. Number 3, stop cursing because it is insulting and demeaning and promotes conflict, hostility, and violence. Number 4, stop gossiping, saying something about a person that we would not be willing to say directly to that person with others listening. Number 5, stop being discourteous, showing a lack of consideration or acting or speaking in such a way that shows little to no regard for how others will be affected. Number 6, stop stealing because it promotes injustice and places a greater value on things than on people or justice. Number 7, stop robbing, using the threat of bodily harm to take something from another person that does not belong to you promotes injustice. Number 8, stop fighting. If people cannot talk in a way that minimizes conflict, they should avoid contact with each other. No contact, no conflict. Number 9, stop killing, except in direct defense of self, others, and or major property. It is best to avoid killing or maiming another person. Number 10, stop squabbling among yourselves and asking racist white supremacists to settle your problems, because racists often create situations where blacks are encouraged to squabble among themselves. Racists do not approve of black people resolving their own problems among themselves without the so-called help of the white people in charge who created the problems in the first place, because that does not promote white supremacy. Minimize conflict, no contact, no conflict. Strategy number 8, maintain a psychological distance from white people. During times of war, the military trains its soldiers to see the opposing army as less than human, not for sport or entertainment, but to maintain a psychological distance, a toughness, so the soldier will be able to kill another human being even when killing goes against his or her conscience or morality. Example: during and after slavery, black women performed domestic and maternal duties for their white slave owners or white employers. Black women nursed white babies at their breasts, raised the white children, cooked the white family's food, cleaned the white family's home, and were often told they were just like one of the family. But at the end of the day, or if the black female stepped over the invisible line separating black from white, she was quickly and often severely reminded that she was still a nigger. The white family said the black female was just like family, yet they still maintained a psychological distance from her as a black person, so they would be able to practice racism even if their actions are immoral, unjust, or cruel, maintain the system of white supremacy and white privilege. It is mandatory to maintain a psychological distance from your enemies during times of war, or you will have no emotional or psychological defenses against them. A black man's constructive, self-respecting conduct code for white females, maintaining a psychological distance. My interactions with white females have totally changed. I try my best not to treat a white female as a female without being discourteous or non-constructive. I avoid unnecessary contact with them. I avoid unnecessary communication with them. I avoid reckless eyeballing or even noticing a white female visually. I refrain from complimenting a white female in any way unless it is for a constructive purpose, especially in the area of sex. Anything that benignly defeminizes white females in relation to me so that I am not manipulated with sex or promises of sex or hopes of sex and sexual play. They get the idea, it seems. Unfortunately, I may have hurt some white females' feelings in the process of adapting this personal code, but that's business. It's as though they realize that I'm doing things that no one at the job is doing in relation to them, and it's as though that it's not decent to show no sexual interest in white females. Females seek validation from males and vice versa. It reminds a person of their gender roles and gender expectation in people relations, and it's essential to a person's sanity. Remove that validation, and it will affect that person, especially females. When a man ignores a woman's femininity, it's like taking away their rights and powers as a woman, which means they can't function as a female and they may doubt their femininity. One of the reasons for this behavior is to create and maintain self-respect. Another reason for this is to reduce the chance that I can be seduced by a white female in order to be manipulated or fooled for their gain and my loss. Another reason is to ensure that you are taken seriously and not for granted, to also ensure that you are in the most advantageous position possible. Another reason is that I think that a white female will have more respect for a man that does not objectify them, especially if he is black, considering all of the stereotypes. Another reason most white females are less likely to ask you, "Why do you not treat me like a lady?" Consequently, they will be puzzled that a male, especially a black male, is defeminizing them if they even guess that's occurring. This means that the black male has the power in that situation because the white female will always thirst for an answer to why you treat her like she has a penis instead of a vagina and two breasts. All of this equals to power and actually empowers black females when they are made aware of what you are doing. They love it, which means I love it. On the other hand, I have greatly improved my relations with non-white females by focusing all my masculine energy on them and trying to over-validate them, and I have gotten some very, very good results. None of this is easy. It requires a lot of work and discipline, but this is war. It is also not easy because I'm an art student, and at school there's lots of white females. And no matter what, I am a male, and as far as the laws of attraction go, anything is possible. That's why this requires training and discipline. Think of my suggestion as one way to counter this bleaching down process. Black Murgatroyd, 2010. For those who think Black Murgatroyd's response is unreasonable, let's look at the conduct code that has been used by white males for over 500 years. The white male's conduct code for non-white females to maintain white supremacy. My intentions with non-white females have changed little in the last 500 years. I avoid unnecessary contact with them if I cannot be in a dominant position or unless it involves sexual intercourse. I avoid unnecessary communication with non-white females except in the course of conducting business, making a profit, or promoting white interests, white supremacy. I avoid reckless eyeballing or even noticing non-white females visually, especially when other whites are around. I refrain from complimenting non-white females in public, although I may do it privately when other whites are not around, and expressly for the purpose of having sexual intercourse. Anything that defeminizes non-white females in relation to me is done so I do not diminish white supremacy superiority by being manipulated with sex, promises of sex, or hope of sex and sexual play with non-white females. Non-white females get the idea, it seems, that in the white man's eyes, they will never be equal to the white female. I may have hurt some non-white females' feelings in the process, but that's the business of white supremacy. They do not realize I do these things because I am a part of a white organization that is dedicated to maintaining white supremacy, which means white males should not show any sexual interest in non-white females in the presence of other whites, especially in the presence of white females. Females seek validation from males and vice versa. It reminds a person of their gender roles and gender expectation in people relations, and it's essential to a person's self-esteem. Remove that validation, and it will affect that person, especially females. When a male ignores a woman's femininity, it's like taking their rights or powers as a woman, which means they can't function as a female, and they may doubt their femininity because it's important that non-white females believe they are inferior to white females. Another reason is to reduce the chance that I can be emotionally seduced by a non-white female and be manipulated or fooled, which means a loss for me as a white man, the white race, and the system of white supremacy. Another reason is to ensure that whites are taken seriously and to ensure the most advantageous position possible for whites. Another reason is white females have more respect or consideration for a white man who does not treat non-white females as their equals. Another reason is most non-white females will not dare ask a white man, "Why do you not treat me like a lady?" because they do not understand that's my intention, to defeminize and dehumanize them, so I will not be too compassionate toward them. By doing so, the white male maintains the most power in that situation, since the non-white female will always accept her inferior status when you treat her like she has a penis instead of a vagina and two breasts. All of this equals to power and actually empowers white females when they are made aware of what we, white males, are doing. They love it, which means I love it. By doing so, I have greatly improved my relations with white females by focusing all my masculine energy on them and trying to over-validate them, and I have gotten some very, very good results. None of this is easy. It requires a lot of work and discipline, but this is war. It is also not easy because I'm an art student and there are many, many beautiful and sexually desirable black and non-white females in my city who I would love to paint nude and do a lot more. And no matter what, I am a male, and as far as the laws of attraction go, anything is possible. That's why this requires training and discipline. There are a minority of white males who sex and marry non-whites, but this still maintains the system of white supremacy because they usually get the pick of the black and non-white litter, which neutralizes these females and stops them from reproducing with non-white males. Think of my suggestion as one way to counter the browning of white America and the destruction of white supremacy. Maintaining a psychological distance from white people has nothing to do with hating white people. It is a wartime strategy that whites have used successfully against non-whites for hundreds of years, and it has been extremely successful. Strategy number 9. Black people must become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We must become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Gus Renegade, host of the C.O.W.S Radio. My suggestions in this chapter will make some readers uncomfortable. The idea of using psychological counter-warfare against whites makes some blacks literally sweat under the collar. However, if we are not extremely uncomfortable with racism, police brutality, murder by cop of unarmed black men and women, inferior black schools, unjust incarcerations, and economic, housing, and employment discrimination, nothing should make us uncomfortable. Strategy number 10. Show black love openly and publicly. Black men and women, black husbands and wives, black mothers and fathers, black sons and daughters, black sisters and brothers, black parents and children should show affection openly and publicly. It is especially important for parents to show love for each other openly and publicly in front of their children, so your children will know it is normal and desirable for black men and women to like, love, and sexually desire each other. It is only in the Western culture and mind that normal sexual and affection between black males and black females is considered wrong, dirty, while black homosexuality is openly encouraged and rewarded. Showing love should not be restricted to family members or romantic or sexual partners. Love should not be restricted to blood relations. Love is showing kindness and courtesy openly and publicly to all black people, even strangers, so our black children will learn it is normal and desirable for black men and black women to respect and care about each other. Of course, courtesy should be extended to all people, but our main focus should be on repairing the bonds between the black male, female, and child that were destroyed during slavery and 500 years of racist oppression. Do not be discouraged if a sick person does not respond to your kind treatment. Push on and keep planting the seeds of unity. We must love each other like our children's lives depend on it, because they do. Strategy number 11. Adopt the mantra of black unity and make this our new black national anthem. When you attack one of us, you attack all of us. When you attack black men, you attack me, a black woman, because I came from a black man. When you attack black women, you attack me, a black man, because I came from a black woman. When you degrade, stereotype, or harm one of us, you harm me, because mistreating one is the same as mistreating all of us. Strategy number 12. The 33 Rules of Disengagement. Stop showing off, bragging, and talking too much. Number 1. Stop styling, profiling, bragging, and boasting about who you are, what you look like, or what you have. It matters more who you are when no one is looking. Number 2, stop showing off or trying to impress white people. They don't care. Number 3, all opposition to racism should be constructive and promote justice and correction, not avenge racial wrongs. If the offending parties refuse to stop practicing racism, replace dialogue with constructive self-help strategies. Sex and relationships. Number 4, stop having sex with strangers, acquaintances, and people who are not committed to you. Sex is spiritual as well as physical. Every time we have sex with another person, we absorb the spiritual nature, good or bad, of our sexual partner, and this becomes part of our spiritual nature. Number 5, stop having unprotected sex outside of marriage. This will limit the spread of venereal diseases, man-made viruses, the number of unplanned pregnancies, and at-risk neglected children. Number 6, stop having sex for money and material things. You do not have to stand on a street corner to be a prostitute. If you are selling your precious body for a promotion, favors, money, or things, you are prostituting yourself. This is true for males and females. Number 7, stop making babies if you are not in a committed marriage with a committed partner. We must break the generational curse of the dysfunctional black family and at-risk black children. Number 8, stop having children you are not willing or able to raise, love, nurture, provide for, and protect. This will break the generational curse of the dysfunctional black family and at-risk black children. Number 9, stop having babies to hang on to a man or a woman. If they don't want you, why do you want them? Above all else, respect self. Stop worshiping money and material things. Number 10, stop choosing role models for our children because they are rich. Stop looking to strangers to be role models and become your own children's role models. Children need role models at eye level: parents, adults, teachers, police officers, firefighters, and the business people in their communities. Number 11, stop teaching our children to look outside themselves and teach them to value what is already inside. If we help build them their self-respect and self-esteem from the gifts God gave them, our children won't need black role models, superstars, showcase blacks, false prophets, political pimps, holy white grails, or white validation. Self-respect, self-reliance. Number 12, stop demanding respect from other people. You do not have a social contract with everyone you meet. The only person who is obligated to respect you is you. Unless someone's behavior harms you other than hurting your feelings, the most powerful response is to put them on ignore. Worry more about respecting yourself. Number 13, we do not control anything in a white supremacy system but ourselves. We cannot out-police the police, outspend the super rich, outfight the military, or out-televise the networks, but we do have control over the most important possession we own, ourselves. We can refuse to participate in anything that degrades, demeans, and destroys black people. Number 14, stop doing those things that require free will and work against our individual and collective interests. For example, no one can make us buy, listen to, or watch a CD, movie, or DVD that degrades black people. Number 15, stop praising black people because they are biracial or their skin color, hair, skin, and eyes make them look more white than black. What does that say about you and your self-esteem if you look more black? Number 16, stop supporting black entertainers, artists, politicians, poets, filmmakers, scholars, and activists who degrade black people by promoting negative stereotypes. Number 17, stop disrespecting black people. No one can make us disrespect black people or call black people foul names. No one can make us turn against our mothers and fathers, wives and husbands, sons and daughters, or neighbors. No one can make us replace love with hate. No one can make us place a white woman or white man on a sexual pedestal or knock a black man or black woman off one. Number 18, stop participating in activities that destroy the black community. For example, if we stopped using drugs, the drug dealers would be forced to find another profession. If we refused to buy stolen merchandise, the burglars, robbers, and thieves would be forced to find a legitimate source of income instead of victimizing their communities and filling up the nation's prisons. If we refused to buy or watch degrading movies, TV shows, and music videos, they would stop making them. Number 19, stop expecting white people to solve our problems. It is our responsibility to solve our own problems because we have the most to lose if we don't. Number 20, become your own authority on the things that affect your life and family. We must become our own authority, educating ourselves so we cannot be deceived or intimidated by those who practice racism. Number 21, stop working against the interests of black people. In other words, the system of white supremacy requires our cooperation and participation in harming other black people. Save the children and the black family. Number 22. take control of the education of our black children so their intellectual potential will not be destroyed by the anti-black educational system. We must start our own independent school system so we can empower our children with the truth instead of allowing them to be poisoned by lies and an inadequate education. Number 23. Stop letting the radio, television, video, and DVDs raise your children. Spend more family time talking at the bookstore, the playground, and the library. Number 24. Turn off the television and radios once in a while and read a book like this one in front of your children. Our children imitate what they see us do, not what we tell them to do. Number 25. Teach our children to love the written word. If our children are taught to love the written word, they will always be in the learning mode. Black adults must educate themselves by reading books like this one and encourage the massive intellectual power of our children. Number 26. Teach your children to love the written word. The reason slaves were punished for reading is the slave owners knew reading led to thinking. The same thing is true today. The average black public school deliberately makes learning boring, humiliating, and painful. If our children hate to read or learn, they will be forced to rely on their enemies for information and everything else they need. Number 27. Do not conduct illegal and dishonest activities in front of your children or accept the reality that your children will not respect you even while they imitate you. Number 28. Stop fussing and fighting with your children's mother or father. Our children must take priority over our own selfish ego interests. We made the decision to have them or didn't make the right decision to not have them. Our children did not ask to be born. We must not make them pay for our foolishness. Number 29. Adopt the 80% rule for building strong marriages and families. Each partner giving 50-50 means both are half-assing, half-stepping. If each partner gives 80%, there will always be a surplus, 160% total effort of love, care, empathy, support, and constructive actions. If your partner is willing to give only 50% or less, it may be time to get a new partner. If this applies to you, it may be time for serious self-analysis or to consider the option of being alone. Politics. Number 30. Hold all black politicians to the highest possible standards. Demand to know what they are going to do for us, not what they think we should be doing for ourselves before they get our votes. Demand that all black politicians treat black voters with the same respect they give non-black voters. Number 33. Understand that a politician is a politician is a politician. A politician is not a preacher. We do not need them to preach at us. We need to know what they are going to do for us if we vote them into office. If after one term they cannot prove they are working in the black collective's best interests, vote them out of office. Number 32. Black civil rights organizations that are funded by outsiders, non-blacks, should be automatically suspect. Everyone has an agenda. Until we know what their agenda is, they should not be trusted. Number 33. Do not trust the showcase blacks who are used to wow and amaze us. Their success has nothing to do with progress for the black masses. Black progress can only be measured by what happens to the black masses, not to the few hand-picked blacks. Even the cruelest master must throw his starving dog an occasional bone to keep it loyal and to keep the dog from attacking its tormentor. Yes, we are the starving dogs, not the masters. Strategy number 13. Become a leader of one. Number 1. Become a leader of one. Once the individual is empowered, they do not depend on other people to do the right thing. Number 2. The empowered individual raises empowered children. This also ensures that a movement does not rest on the shoulders of one man or one woman. An empowered individual is spiritually contagious if their actions are just, constructive, and righteous. The empowered individual can spread the gospel in a way a so-called national leader cannot. Number 3. The empowered individual leads by example. The national leaders cannot because most have already been purchased, bribed, or threatened into cooperating with our enemies. They are the wily foxes in sheep's clothing and the false prophets who will lead the black sheep to slaughter. Number 4. Civil rights organizations are like sprinters. They start off running at full speed and are out of steam and ideas before the end of the race for justice. The empowered individual is a marathon runner in the race for the duration. The empowered individual is a leader of one and does not get frustrated as easily as those whose power comes from a group because he or she is not totally dependent on what a group does or does not do, and is not disabled because a so-called leader is disabled. Number 5, by choosing not to participate in those activities that demean or degrade black people, we increase our personal power and self-respect. Number 6, you cannot control anyone but yourself. By making more self-respecting decisions, you will influence others around you, even those that try to make you look or feel foolish. Number 7, becoming a leader of one means you are making a powerful change from low to high self-respect. This may frighten and intimidate those who are still locked into self-disrespecting behavior. Do not let them discourage you. Before you know it, they will be singing your praises. Number 8, if you have children, teach by example. When your children hear you say you refuse to do X or Y because it is disrespectful or harmful to black people, they are listening to you. We must plant the right seeds in our children if we want to grow flower gardens instead of weeds. Number 9, study the system of racism, white supremacy, so you will understand how it works. You cannot defeat racism if you do not understand how racism, white supremacy works. Number 10, stop asking, begging for inclusion into a club, the white supremacy system, that does not want you as a member. If you become a token member, you become part of the problem, not the solution. Number 11, pool our skills, resources, money, and talent to benefit and enrich the black collective instead of making other communities stronger and richer with our dollars. Number 12, stop trusting showcase blacks simply because they are black. Being black first does not mean they will work on our behalf. Pay more attention to what they do or don't do and less on what they say. Number 13, stop hating on other black people. When we pull someone up, we pull ourselves up. Encourage the constructive efforts and ambitions of other black people because those efforts help the entire black collective. The power of universal karma equals the universal boomerang. The universal boomerang is the most powerful force in the world. It is God force, karmic, universal. What good we put into the universe will be returned to us. If we are just and morally correct, what our enemies put out into the universe against us will be turned against them. We will attract the kind of justice we deserve. We must not make the mistakes of imitating those who abuse their power. Once the black collective regains our sanity and self-respect, only then should we seek unity with the non-black masses to fight for a more peaceful and God-loving planet ruled by universal man, universal woman, and the law of universal justice.
Black people pass this book
Each
along.
one, teach one. Do what you can where you can. Become your own leader of one.
We are done.
Pass this book
Black
along.
Love is a
We must forgive
act.
each other.
Woo! Mercifully. Thank you. I can only say, I will go to folks who dialed in, the number 641-715-3640, the code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I can only say, I took a lot of notes, so it's many things I could say, but I can only say that final sentence of the book about forgiveness. Those type of contradictions. The book already stated no mercy to a disloyal black male, talking exclusively about black males. Those type of contradictions. If you're following a book, and I think I said this on the compensatory call-in last week, we didn't have a book club when I read this book the first time around. My skills at analyzing a book have probably improved drastically as a result of having this book club and reading with you all, some of you all for years, that we have been reading every week and going through these books and different types of what reading is more important than watching television, having to use different muscles. Oh, I don't know what that word is. Let's look that up. What does this mean? What does that mean? And different references, just that I think is so important to increasing your skill with words, language, just on so many different levels, and also how you analyze a book. And I think that is a big part, because those types of things, I think you become more observant, more keen at noticing those type of contradictions within a text. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I'll only say one more thing, and then we'll get to folks who dialed in. We do have audio from Pam today. It really has been like being in the Twilight Zone, reading this book. I've said that before. What does that mean? Not only are we reading this book, a book that I've said for 2 weeks now is the worst book I've ever read. We're reading this book in tribute to someone who passed away this year, who was very close to me, Pamela Harris. And we're reading a book where I'm quoted to be hearing, listening with you all, where I'm quoted. Yep, absolutely, Gus T, that's what I say. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Absolutely. I've been saying that for years. I haven't said it as much of late, but absolutely. In the archives, said it all the time. I cannot tell you how I don't even have a word for. That's why I keep saying the Twilight Zone, because I don't really have words to capture how bizarre that is to be reading a book where you're quoted. I'm referenced in the introduction to the book and interviewed the author, and I'm saying this is the worst book I've ever read. My God, it is. Anywho, I just wanted to make sure that is officially stamped part of the record. And I think this is a historic book club. I cannot think of a book club where I have been more shocked, surprised. I felt like I learned some extraordinary things. I drastically, exponentially underestimated Black Misandry. It's been an amazing book club. The responses of the listeners have equally surprised me. Historic. I hope people get an opportunity to listen to all 9 segments chronologically to hear the progression over the past few weeks. Absolutely amazing. I'm sorry it was disrupted by my prenatal yoga teacher training. But we are back in. This is our last Friday book club. It'll be rotating. We'll be on Thursday. Moving forward, the book club will be Thursday, and workplace racism will be on Friday to accommodate some of the folks from in different parts of the world who call in for the book club. Whew. With that, folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, getting to the phone lines, number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. If we have anybody at all, any readers at all, who think that this is a constructive, accurate text, please dial in to share your thoughts. Please. We don't have any more audio, so it'll just be time for us to share when we are done with the commentary. That will be it for the broadcast. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, before we get to anyone, make sure, again, robust thanks to Medi, Red in Nevada, for doing absolutely outstanding work, and I do mean labor. Doing as someone 10 years of broadcasting, it is no easy task doing audio narration, and I am super thankful. That is really hard work. I've had to do the narration myself before. I am super grateful for you two ladies pitching in and doing professional, polished recording. Much obliged. I think several listeners have also said much obliged, and thank you kindly for your labor for the past 2 months. And to show our appreciation, Brad in Nevada, if you would like to go first, much obliged for all of your efforts.
Well, Well, thank you for allowing me to share, and thank you. I'm definitely glad I could help in any way, shape, or form. Hello, everyone. And I guess I actually wanted to, I know I haven't participated in a little while. I wanted to go back a couple of chapters. I know, of course, it's been referenced. Some of the things I won't even bother sharing because I know it's already been referenced. But it seems, I guess I could just go back to chapter 40 with the balloon one. I know one of the things was, like even on the first page, it was, talking about how, like, the basket being the black male, as soon as he saw these shiny, puny balloons that weren't like the big, ugly brown balloon, he immediately was, intrigued, I guess. And I just thought that was interesting. And, goes back to the theme of being feverish. And even also the sentence where it says, heartbroken, the basket watched as the brightly colored balloons shrank in the distance as they were, floating along. And it kind of reminded me of, just a synonym for feverish. He was heartbroken. The other thing was in that same chapter, I couldn't quite understand, like towards the end of that story, the sentence, the swirling waters rose until they completely covered the jagged white rocks for the first time in 1,000 years. The raging waters were calm and peaceful. So it kind of seems as if, I guess maybe I'm incorrectly trying to analyze that sentence, but it seems as if as soon as like, I guess, racist white supremacists destroy black people completely, then that's when they'll be peaceful. But if I'm misanalyzing it, I definitely apologize. But if that's what I'm getting from this sentence, it makes it seem as if, we're also the problem between white people. But I thought when white people weren't really in contact with non-whites, or especially black people, they were still fighting amongst themselves. So definitely, would appreciate anyone's input on that sentence, or maybe I'm just, maybe it's just me. The other thing, I know there was a part where it was kind of odd. Some of the things in the chapter about the blame game, it also, like throughout the rest of the book, it kind of goes back to almost like a contradiction with the blame game one. It's like, well, black fathers, they're not, they don't just abandon people, they do stick around with their children. But then later on in the book, it kind of makes it seem like it subtly contradicts what was told, the problems of the blame game. There's a part in chapter, chapter 41, where the authors talk about babies born of black male, white female unions. Of course, that whole theme is consistent. It says, are more likely to be raised by a single white mother. Kind of makes it seem as if, again, the black fathers, either they don't care about the children even that they have with white women that they so feverishly want to be around, or who knows, that's kind of like left unsaid. And, of course, I'm sure they already talked about the part at the bottom, on that same chapter about, they're the biggest threat to to the end of white supremacy. I guess, one second. I thought it was interesting, some of the references to, like, God and karma. I don't quite understand karma. I feel like I don't really have a belief in that, because it seems like what type of horrible act did some black people do in the past to make, black people, all their generations, have to suffer under racism, white supremacy, if we're under this belief of karma? And what type of, is karma supposed to be equal? If someone kills someone else unjustly, and, is their death, like a karmic reaction, or should they just be tortured for, 5-10 years and then that's it? I feel like I kind of despise this whole idea of karma. I know towards the end, there is that more talk of karma. But actually, I'm sorry, I got a little bit off track. Chapter 44, there's the part again about God. Their God will never abandon them in their time of need, and he would not abandon them now. I completely disagree with that. I don't know where that would even come from. I kind of feel like, some of the most religious people, which maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I thought, slaves are religious. When was God around them? It just does not make sense to me. It kind of reminds me of, the whole flawed idea of Christianity. In the last chapter 45, number 4 under 13 counter warfare strategies, where it said number 4, stop keeping white people's secrets. I think that would have been a perfect area to include, if Black females are having sex with white males more. I think that's supposed to be a secret. Maybe to also say, hey, maybe you should either stop doing that or, just fess up to what you're doing and then also say why it's so incorrect instead of, completely leaving that out. There's the part about, actually, I'll stop right there. There's a few other things I have to share, but I'm sure we'll have time. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Red. Interesting point about the balloon and I guess the white waters becoming peaceful after the basket was demolished. I think your point is totally correct, historically accurate. Whites were killing each other. There was no peace when they were not in direct contact with individuals with melanin, high concentrations of melanin. But that is interesting. I don't know if that was what was supposed to be was intended or what other people thought about that portion of the story from, I think, last week with the balloon and the basket. Other folks can share their thoughts. Others who dialed in, if you have a hand up, lines should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Greetings.
All right. Greetings, Gus. This is Henry from Chicago. Just getting on to the book club. Couldn't make the Wednesday shows or the Monday show, but I did listen to the archives in regards to catching up with the text. This book is it's very, very frustrating. To me, the first 20 chapters were okay, and then it just basically that's when the frustration started coming in regards to, and I think that's where I had to go to the archives in regards to listening to the book club. But what's been frustrating even from the beginning of the book is and I think a caller 2 weeks ago had mentioned this, how sloppy this book is in regards to, the kind of textual form and textual technique that some of these chapters have. And I know it's been stated that Pam is not the only author. She may be like the main, the chief editor or the one of the main authors, but you kind of get a feeling that these chapters have been written by other people, and it's almost like totally different views and perspectives and language that's being used. I mean, like some of the stuff says that our research, and then it goes back to saying I, and the epithets, and I think you mentioned this, Gus, the random epithets. For some reason or another, coming from, Facebook posts and, websites and, whatever. So it's kind of like, somebody did their research on Facebook to, put some of these chapters together. So I was equally frustrated, with that particular aspect of it. And also too, in the recent reading about, they were talking about, Black, there was a chapter where they were talking about Black love being revolutionary. And then they go into, resources in Africa, without any transition. So it's like, that was kind of frustrating as well. But that was the whole thing, is the literary style of it. And even though it probably wasn't meant to be a purely academic book, I've read books that weren't purely academic, and they were much well organized than this book. So that was kind of like my biggest frustration. And also too, there was a number, like you've been mentioning, and other people have been mentioning the last couple of weeks about, the anti-blackmail tone that is also in here as well. That's all I have for now in my line.
Important point about the language, our research, and I think that's important because, as I said, Pam is not the only person who wrote the book, and I know in speaking with her, she did talk about, even on the air, about having an editor to try to make it more cohesive so that readers would experience it as though there was only one person who wrote it, even though it was multiple people. But you obviously picked out some portions where you can note the lack of cohesion, among other problems. Other folks who dialed in, much obliged, caller in Chicago. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, line should be open if you have a hand up.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll
Go ahead, ma'am.
Right on.
Okay, greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers on the line. Like you and Red said, I took a lot of notes as well, and thank you again to Medi and Red. You guys did such an incredible job where I was really able to absorb the book. You guys didn't read too fast or anything like that. It just was perfect to me. With the rape scene at the end, the wife was the hero and the husband was weak. She did everything, and he even got attacked because the other person was too big for him and too strong and this and that, and she stabbed him in the back and all this and that. I think that was intentional, and there was this distressing again, or this emphasizing again that the man should protect when black men cannot do that. In terms of pooling our resources, I mean, we need to replace white supremacy with justice, because we can pool resources all day long and open up businesses and this and that, and they'll do what they do, which is just, raid our businesses on trumped up charges, mass incarcerate us, build freeways over them, bridges over them. That's just, what they do. Puppet is name calling. There was no talk of the homosexual women who were in prison and in the NBA, in the WNBA. We don't follow leaders. We don't even like them. Like, all of our so-called leaders are being criticized all the time. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and the rest of them.
Kanye West.
Yes, Kanye West. Thank you for that. I'm always emphasize this. The term crack, I think, is very incorrect, and it should be cocaine, unless we're going to say dog food in place of opioids. This thing about designer purchases, that's a lie. We don't have Burberry and all this other stuff. Fruit of the Loom is a designer purchase. Black people don't have no money. We don't have, them type of clothes. So to sit there and generalize us as far as that is just not even true. And I'll speak more on that later, maybe even tomorrow. Lack of validation from the opposite sex does not affect women more than men. That is false. There was no anecdotes for black women honoring black men. There was an anecdote that this black man is saying, I'm going to treat, other women, unless they're black, that they have a penis instead of a vagina and two breasts. There was no anecdote like that for honoring black men. Political pimp is name calling. There was this emphasis on stop supporting black entertainers who degrade us. What about stop supporting any entertainer who degrades us? I think that was anti-black to say that. That's just my view. About the racial showcasing versus showcase black. The racial showcasing, that term places the emphasis on the incorrect front that white supremacists put on, because they put up this front that they're showcasing us to pretend as though they're not depriving the masses of resources. And so to say racial showcasing, that puts the emphasis on their incorrect behavior of trying to disguise their depriving us of resources. When you say showcase blacks, there's this emphasis on the incorrect behavior of the people who are being showcased. There was a statement that black women, we act out based on trauma, but that was not given to black men. This thing about the brunt of sexual degradation, and some of these things that I'm saying is based on clips and not just the book, that the brunt of sexual degradation that women have suffered, black women have suffered that. I'm not so sure that that's true. I mean, when you get the fact that black men have been labeled as racist and have been castrated and murdered as a result, I don't know about all that. And then preaching at black men that they should stand up or protect us when we're degraded and this, that, and the other. First of all, they do that. But where's the lecture about us not protecting and defending our men when they are being degraded, like when they're being pegged as racist, as rapists and criminals and all these different things. For the most part, black women, we actually just stand by. We don't say anything. For the most part. So there needs to be a lecture about that. I'm almost done. A lecture about we need to stop degrading ourselves in music videos and everything else. Stop bending over in videos, laying in bed with women, and standing next to with men in between us, simulating homosexuality. Stop posing half naked in videos and magazines and TV. And the last thing I guess I'll say is that black women are not innocent. There was a statement that I thought was horrible, that the most anti-black and self-hating thing you can do is to rob and kill other black people. Well, that was a shot at black men because men are most known for doing this, but black women rob and kill each other as well and set up black men to be robbed and killed. And I'll mute my line. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gus.
Much obliged, Ivy. Mr. Demery 4, thank you for yielding. You should be with us, sir.
Yes, may I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, greetings, Gus. Greetings to the other callers, listeners. I enjoyed Ivy's last commentary. She brought up a lot of points that, I think we all probably fail to think about that homosexuality in the WNBA. I think that was brought to attention on a few players misbehaving badly. That was part of my notes. I was going to start my commentary with the balloon analogy, but, I think the first female caller did a good job on that low down, worthless basket, kept looking at the other different colored balloons and started the whole thing in the first place. I also thought that the host, Gus, may have been a little hard by using the word Misandry on the book, so I looked the word up and, it had contempt in there, and I'm thinking, well, is it really contempt? Then you look up contempt, and it's intentional, shaming or worthless. And, everything that contempt, definition of contempt, is what was being exhibited in the book. So I had to just, give in on that. I guess that is a correct word for what's going on here. I thought that she did give a definition of love, finally. That was one of your questions. But it's just a basic definition, kind of intense feeling towards something or someone based on some form of physical action. But if you are showing empathy to someone, I wouldn't say that is the same as loving them. And black love being different from love in itself, I'm not sure about that either. I had a problem before with, I believe one part she was talking about education and, something about how young black females were encouraged to further their education and young black males were discouraged into furthering education. But as far as my experience goes, as long as we're in a system of white supremacy, and white supremacy is a dominant motivating force in the interactions between all people in a known universe, then those that classify themselves as white, hindering education, it would be both male and female, non-white on both ends. And getting used to the idea that we are at war. I think the host Gus have mentioned several times that white people are at war with black people. Black people are not at war with white people. We are in a war, and she said, according to the book, the authors, we cannot afford to waste any more time talking about what white people should do for us and find a way to do for ourselves. But I think it's not a waste of time for victims to discuss what white people are presently doing to us and adopt counter-racist strategies. Recognize that whites are at war with black people, but what position will we as individuals take? An active role, lip service, or the front line where you're most likely to be targeted for elimination? I think it was pretty brave that our author had put herself on the front line and then bared her thoughts in a recorded text. That's pretty brave in itself. And then to stand by this work. She, just a couple of things here. She also said that love is showing kindness and courtesy openly and publicly to all black people, even strangers, so our children will learn it is normal and desirable for black men and black women to respect and care about each other. I think that's directly related to, the way things were at an earlier time when black people may have been under the impression that there was a black community and people did act differently at that time, and it had a resemblance of the fact that people cared about each other. And I think that when she quoted you, Gus, I'm not sure, you can correct me, but we must become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if you are in a position where you don't feel uncomfortable and all this is going on, I think that you probably have a false sense of comfort. In other words, I know when I was less confused, if I was not aware of something, how could I be uncomfortable with it? When you are really ignorant about something, it gives you a false sense of security, and intelligent fear would be more applicable to the condition that we're in. And I'll mute my line on that, Gus. Thanks for taking the call.
Much obliged. Mr. Demifor, she did indeed. Pamela Harris quoted me correctly. We must become comfortable being uncomfortable. Indeed, that is a Gus T quote in the archives. Been saying that for some years. I'd stopped saying it, but maybe I should get back to saying it again. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I will keep an eye on the switchboard. I do have audio from Pam where she's talking about the counter war code. So I'll include that, the section where Black Megatroid, I think, was the person's handle that they were using or what have you. I'll play that as we proceed. Some of the notes that I took. The concept of protection, because that came up again, even at the end, the concluding rape anecdote about protecting. And I said last week with conviction, I thought it was important. I think retired firefighter commented, if we are in a system of white supremacy, which we are, that's one thing the book and I are in agreement. Pam and I were in agreement. System of white supremacy, absolutely. It is impossible, following logic, it is impossible for Black people any Black person to protect any Black person, including themselves. You see this every day. Imagine Eric Garner's wife talking about Eric Garner protects me at any time. Imagine that. That's what I mean. It's not logical what's being said. It's not understanding exactly what Mr. Fuller said. If you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you think you understand will confuse you. That concept of protection, again, I think what I said last week, the system of white supremacy is a global prison, a global concentration camp, a global plantation, however you need to think of it. That's what it is. Forgive the metaphor, but the entire universe as we know it is under total domination by a racist man, racist woman, racist child. They dominate everything, all areas of people activity. There's nowhere we can go to escape it. Unless they have a different concept of protect. When I think protect, I think, hey, you get this person and it's back down. Racist, anybody else that wants to do me some harm, back down. Don't make me have to, get up. Now any sort of injustice or mistreatment stops right here. Or I got, whoever thinks that they're going to do some mistreating, thinks you're going to go after some niggers, I got you in the next 5 seconds. And that's it. All problem. That's what I think of when I think protection. Like, hey, we can go and do whatever. I can go wherever I want to. I don't have to worry about, racists sneaking something. They got everything. Everything is under control. I am at ease. That's what I think of when I think of protect. And I have concluded under the system of white supremacy, no Black person can do that. If anybody listening to this program, live or archived, if you know of such a Black person, contact me immediately. I will discontinue the program and we will just go and hang out with them. We'll see if we can just, get a shack or a tent and stay around them as much as possible and see if that improves our lot. Maybe that would be better than listening to the context of white supremacy. I'm saying this with emphasis because it was brought up again in the book, and someone posted on our SoundCloud, the archives at iTunes are still not working correctly, but the archives abound at Black Talk Radio Network, at YouTube, courtesy of Mr. Fox, at SoundCloud, at Google Play, plethora of different outlets for you to access the archives of the cows. The comment reads, a woman wants to be protected by her man, period. You can't say Black men can't defend their women because of racism, but then say black love is a revolutionary act? What woman wants to be in a relationship with a man that can't protect? Question mark. Thank you for the question. Again, and I understand what's being said, except for the part about you can't say a black man can't defend their women because of racism, but then say black love is a revolutionary act. I would never, I am not saying now, and I have never said black love is a revolutionary act other than in reference to the title of this book. That is the only time that I say that. I say, following logic, it's not possible for any black person, male or female, to protect anybody, including themselves, and you see this demonstrated every day. I'm following logic. I do not say black love is a revolutionary act. I don't say that at all. And even if you do subscribe to that, whatever that means would have to include understanding the position we are in as subjects of racism and what that means. I am in a weak position. This individual classified as black is in a weak position. They're not going to be able to protect. They can, do whatever as best they can. But we just had that situation in Florida. I mentioned that last week, the stand your ground. That's your protection in the system of racism, white supremacy. You can be thankful for the attempt, I guess. Other notes that I had. Sloppy. I think that was asked, a listener asked, is this book sloppy? And I said it's inaccurate, which it is. But he asked, and I said, going by the definition, yes, it's sloppy. I hadn't been using that term. If I want to, yes, this book is sloppy. I didn't even catch everything. Now on page 71, I said I went through and I read the Amazon critiques. I learned so much reading this book. Pamela Harris, I learned so much reading this book. I went through and I read the critiques. I read dozens of them. I only saw one person say, oh, wow, this book is feverishly anti-black male in its content. I only saw one out of dozens. Everybody, oh, it's fantastic, amazing, brilliant, rave reviews. Whew. I go through, there was one who said, wow, this book is sloppy. And I think they used the word sloppy. This book is really sloppy in the way that it's put together. And they said on page 71, this book says, and I'm on page 71, in 1829, David Walker, a black slave, published Walker's Appeal, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on. And the commenter said, David Walker was not a slave. He was a free abolitionist. That's easy. You could have went 30 seconds and done a search. You could have read his speech where he says, I traveled as a free man. He said that. How could you not take 30 seconds for somebody who's that significant to get correct information to call him a slave when he wasn't? Sloppy. He said just that little detail really bothered him. Now, I didn't even catch that tidbit as we were going through the book, but I did look, and lo and behold, he's correct. Or she, might have been a female. But that's what I mean about sloppy. I could use the word sloppy if I wanted to. This is sloppy. Now, I don't know if Pam wrote this or not, but to have these sorts of inaccuracies, and again, the misattribution to Mr. Fuller, I appreciated Ivy's pointing out the, in my view, extraordinary difference in where the focus goes when we start talking about showcase blacks, because there was a lot of that down the stretch. And I must insist on going back. I think last week when she was talking about having showcase blacks and these puppets, they will often put two black males together to battle it out. The black Misandry even came through there. But it is an extraordinary difference in where the focus goes when we say racial showcasing, which is an action carried out by whites, as opposed to showcase blacks. And then to attribute that to Mr. Fuller, like, I could go much harder than sloppy. In fact, it maybe even should be considered, was this done intentionally? I think somebody at least did raise that. There are enough errors. Anytime you start seeing that many errors that are to the detriment of a black person, any black person, yeah, I think it's very reasonable to start saying, well, maybe this was done intentionally. Don't have to even go that far. We can just leave it at, it's very sloppy, and there's a lot of black misandry. Continuing. Let's see. always important to point out we are not at war. And some of these things, I guess some people, if you're new to the cows, you might say that this is just nitpicking about, well, the David Walker thing, that's not nitpicking, that's sloppiness. But some of this you might say is nitpicking with words in terms of what's being said in the book, White Privilege. I talked about that before. We continue use of that term, that we are at war. We're not at war. Again, if you don't understand racism, what it is, how it works, everything else will confuse you. We are not at war. Dr. Cambon emphasizes that every time we are on this program, he will stop and interrupt you in a heartbeat. If you are talking to him and say, oh yeah, we got to get it together because we're at, whoa, whoa. Whitey is at war with us. That's exactly what he will say. Not, yeah, we are at war with them, because that is not true. And that's just following logic. You got to have accuracy, precision if we're going to solve this problem. Let's see. I've been saying for weeks now, months now, really, definition of love. That should have been very first thing in the book, in my opinion. We finally start to get some definitions for love, and they are not acceptable at all. You cannot define what black love is by then including love in the definition. That is not specific, I think. And then we got a lot of metaphors. Black love is standing together and in unity. No idea what that means. Not nearly specific enough. That just sounds like a lot of the same cliches. Black power, right on. Black and I'm proud. Black love is a revolutionary act. Just rhetoric and cliches, not specific at all. Movies, I said that before. This just sounds like, with all of the sloppiness and movie and pop culture references, it just sounds like I wish the authors had spent more time reading instead of watching television. If this is going to be like a serious analysis of racism, I'm not interested in hearing the latest movie that somebody saw and what Dennis Rodman had to say. I'm not saying that you can't make any references to these people. We talk about movies from time to time on the program, but I think if you look at the dozens of articles that I've published and my general way of presenting an argument about racism, it is not going to be structured around social media commentary and what was at the box office this past year. That is just not acceptable scholarship. It's sloppy. The perfect marriage. Again, if you don't understand the system of white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else will confuse you. Some of these are just fundamentals. And I keep saying it because if you are going through this system thinking that a black person, any black person, male, female, Gus T, Barack Obama, anybody is going to protect you, you are going to be disappointed, often probably, frustrated, and that frustration invariably is going to go to another black person. As I just said, it's not possible for a black person to protect another black person. You're going through life thinking it's possible to have some sort of perfect marriage, whatever that means, in a system of white supremacy. That's not possible in any way, shape, form. The best you can do, as Mr. Fuller says, you have a make do. You just make do as best you can because you got a victim of racism. You're a victim of racism. This is just going to be, trying as best we can to get through this. And he said that even of the Barack and Michelle Obama, victims of bomb threats this week, as they say. Fundamentals of understanding what racism, white supremacy is. That perfect marriage, and that's how the book ends. That is a total fantasy, which is what it was. Total fiction. That is nonsense. That is not having an accurate understanding of what racism, white supremacy is, and even having correct expectations about arrangements between males, females, between black people, period. It's not just males and females. It's no such thing as a gender war. It's just black people, non-white people, period, have poor relationships and will as long as the system of white supremacy exists, period. Black females do not get along with black females, as Pam, one of the few that I've heard that touched on that. Black males don't get along with black males. Just expand the lens. It's not just black males and black females. Black puppets, Ivy, I was so glad to hear that. That is name calling. And I did appreciate non-participation. I think that grand suggestion There were great suggestions at the end, but for me, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to accept the suggestions because there's so many contradictions. How can we talk about being empathetic and not name calling? How does that get mentioned in a book where we've just been name calling the whole way through? We're going through and name calling black males, calling them niggers, not cursing when the black males exclusively were called little ass niggers. I mean, it was very difficult, if not impossible, to accept these suggestions. If anything, it highlights why I say, don't call me brother. None of in the system of white supremacy, all of that is folly. And if anything, this is just another illustration. You can count this at 5,060 illustration. Individuals that do a lot of that talk. I don't know if you heard the audio that played before we started with Mr. Fuller, where he said, people that talk about, oh, I love me some black people. Woo! I just love me some black people. He said those are some dangerous folks. I wasn't using that word, but I had come to the same conclusion because I've just seen repeatedly the people that do the most black brother, black sister, love me some black. They come around so quick to coon and Sambo, showcase blacks and all that. The name calling and just talking really bad about other black people, the anti-blackness, I've seen it for so long. That is not anything that you can rely on to solve problems. You want logic and understanding what has happened, why these things are happening, so that you can have correct expectations and be precise in problem solving. That is the goal of being a counter-racist scientist. That's what we're attempting to be. Other folks who dialed in that we've not heard from at all. And again, if there are any folks, anybody in the known universe who thinks that this book is constructive, that this is a book that they would recommend people read to get an accurate understanding of racism, white supremacy, we must hear your voice on the broadcast. And I am still a flood victim, so I don't have my code book in hand or my library period. If anybody has their word guide and can read Mr. Fuller, what he has to say about racial showcasing, and or if you can find showcase blacks in any of Mr. Fuller's literature or an audio clip, I would love to hear that so that I can stand corrected and in shame if you can find that. But I would like to hear racial showcasing, the correct term that Mr. Fuller uses, and the definition if anybody has his literature available and can do so without taking up too much time and energy. Much obliged. The person who dialed in, I guess you're on the VOP line maybe. If you had commentary to share, your line should be open. Proceed.
Good afternoon. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, everyone. I was taken aback a bit. I've heard Miss Evans and yourself, Gus, on several occasions, I guess. I never was able to join the broadcast when...
If you could speak up, that would be helpful. Maybe get closer to your microphone, or just speak louder with as much black self-respect as you can to project your voice.
Is this better?
A little bit, just lots of energy, and we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm asking if I'm trying to discern what happened in terms of how Miss Evans, on your broadcast, when I heard her, it seemed to me that the dialogue between her and yourself was quite respectable, and that her book, Black Love is a Revolutionary Act, it was written 7 years ago. And do you think that Ms. Evans her, you, me, that by us all being victims, that we should, yes, forgive each other, and to say that some of the things that she said 7 years ago is not exactly what she would think today. So I don't think Miss Evans had hatred of black men. I think
Pause. Has anyone on this broadcast said that Pamela Evans Harris hated black men or had hatred of black males?
Misandry is male.
Has anyone on this program said that Pamela Evans Harris hated black males?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I would like that retracted until you can find an exact quote of anyone saying Pamela Evans Harris hated black males.
I retract that statement. But nevertheless, what does black misandry mean?
Actually, Mr. Demry, can we get the definition? Because he read it for us today. He said he had a problem with that word too. Can we get the definition again, Mr. Demry, since you read it previously?
Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, I don't actually have the definition of misandry, but I wrote down, well, I did look it up, but I didn't write it down. I gave my definition, which was an intense feeling towards something or someone based on some form of physical action. But the misandry is not hatred towards someone, but a dislike towards someone, or to have contempt for someone. That's what I read.
Not someone, for males specifically. Males specifically. Dislike, contempt for males specifically. Thus, black misandry would be dislike, contempt for black males specifically. Did that answer your question, ma'am?
Oh, I didn't have a question.
You asked for the definition of black misandry, or misandry specifically, correct?
Oh, the definition of misandry is hatred of males. And black, I just put black in front of it, and it's black hatred of males. So I apologize if I appear to misquote or misstate. My main reason for calling is that I had heard Pam and yourself dialogue on many occasions in the archives, and I didn't witness this.
Didn't witness what specifically? Didn't witness what specifically?
Well, that black misandry, for one thing, and I found the relationship over the airwaves to be quite cordial and congenial, and I felt as though there was a good understanding of the goals of trying to have counter-racist techniques and developing and understanding that we're all victims. This is what I found. And so I maybe am not the best person to, but to have the conversation about the book, because I only caught the last reading today, and one very short section a couple of weeks ago, and I just didn't feel and I'm just being honest and expressing my point of view, that I didn't find her to be a person I would describe as guilty of black misandry.
Are you talking about what you heard on the broadcast, or are you talking about what you heard from the text, Black Love as a Revolutionary Act?
Well, the book itself.
Okay, the portion that you heard.
Yes, I heard.
Okay.
I heard. That's why I say I'm not probably the best to talk about this matter of her feelings or her thoughts, her internal thinking, but only to say that the parts that I heard, I didn't feel as if she could be charged with that.
Okay. Did you hear the parts of the book where she referred to a black male as a little ass nigger? Did you hear that part of the book?
No, I didn't. And
okay.
Even if
did
I
you hear
did,
the part?
I would not have. I didn't hear the context of.
Okay. Okay. I have no
I
further questions. I have no further questions. You said, if I heard correctly, you would have to hear the context, right?
I did. I don't know if she was speaking of quoting some. I don't know. I didn't hear that part. That's the answer to the. Yeah, and I.
No problem.
As I said.
No problem.
I heard. I'll just finish by saying that I did mostly what I heard in from Ms. Evans was what I heard in the broadcast between you and her, and I found her to be very respectful, and I found her to be warm and thoughtful, and so this does take me somewhat by surprise.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to hold on a second there.
Yes, sir.
I would ask, and I think this is correct, anybody that's going to offer a critique of a text, we are at session 9 of this book.
Yeah.
I think it would be wonderful, and I think you would learn a lot if you start from number 1 and go all the way to number 9 and then make an evaluation about the black misandry, because I'm making this assessment having read this book more than once, from cover to cover. I will only say the book itself, I don't know if you heard that portion today, but the book itself said no name calling. There was no caveat. There was no, unless somebody heard that. I didn't hear a caveat where it said no name calling unless it's a feverish black male. Then get on that coon. And I didn't hear that part of the book. I think I also heard a part that said no cursing. I don't know if you heard that part or not. I think I heard that part too, and I didn't hear any caveats that said unless it's a no good coon black male, and then you go to town and you curse them out, and I didn't hear that. So again, the book is flagrantly contradictory. Even if you just heard that paragraph, that was a short portion. And to your point about how Pam and I conducted ourselves on the program, I agree 1,000%. I do not recall her name calling black males and, behaving in this manner on the program. Although perhaps I should go back and take a listen. That might be something to check for, but I don't remember that. Although I do, and I said in the program, I don't know if you heard it, I said weeks ago, I thought this about this book years ago. And Pam and I had a discussion about this off the air, where I told her some of the same things that I've said here. So all I can say is I think it is correct if you want to make an assessment about the book and what's been said here, particularly if you are surprised, you should go back from the beginning and read the entire book. And then I think you might be less surprised because it's flagrant. There is no way a reasonable person could read this book and say, oh yeah, there's no evidence of black misandry here. And the definition that I'm looking at here, I could make up my own, but this one is fine for misandry, is dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men. And I'm just adding the black on because this is specific to black males. Doesn't say hatred in the definition there. It may in other definitions, but there's no way a reasonable person could read this book from beginning to end and say, oh no, there's no evidence of black misandry here. I will pause there. Let me see if there are any other folks who dialed in who have commentary. If you have not shared at all, again, if we have anybody, if you think this is a constructive inaccurate and racial showcasing. If anybody has Mr. Fuller's text, are you familiar with Mr. Fuller's work? The female caller who just called in, are you familiar with Mr. Fuller's work?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever heard Mr. Fuller use the term racial showcasing?
I've heard him use the correct, as you said, what is it? The other one that you word.
Racial showcasing or showcase blacks? Which term have you heard?
That was in the book. That one, but I may.
Which term specifically? Which term specifically?
Before I clarify that, I could only say, Gus, there's that. But I'm saying that I may have said black showcasing myself. I can forgive myself that.
Okay, but wait,
yes,
I didn't get to hear the first part of your response. There was static. It might have been my line breaking up. If you could just repeat, which term did you say you heard Mr. Fuller use, or which term did you think you've read that you're familiar with Mr. Fuller using? Was it showcase blacks or racial showcasing?
Racial showcasing.
Okay, and then you said, because the audio came back and all I heard was you said you can forgive yourself because I may have used showcase blacks. That was the part that I heard.
I may have said the same thing, and I can forgive myself that.
Okay. Did you say anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm just making sure because my audio went out briefly. That is important, in my opinion. As I said, this is something that I called Mr. Fuller about directly when I recognized that is not the term that Mr. Fuller uses. And he said specifically, I have never used that term. If someone can find that in his text where he uses the term showcase blacks, let's hear it right now, today, so that I can be corrected and stand in shame. If we do have anyone who has access to Mr. Fuller's text and can give us the correct term, which is racial showcasing, I would be most appreciative.
I have the text. If you give me a second, I can go through and get the definition if you like.
That would be splendid if it's not too much trouble, too much time and energy. While Red is doing extra work after she did all the heavy lifting with the narration and now trying to see if we can get the correct term for Mr. Fuller's works, and producejustice.com if you need a word guide, code book, producejustice.com. Other folks, if you have additional comments, feel free.
Gus.
Mr. Demry Ford.
Yes, I was wondering. I have the Mr. Fuller's second book, the Word Guide, and I was specifically looking for that term, but what I found was racial show-offism. And it says non-white people pretending that they are not subject to the will of white supremacy races in any one or more areas of activity. Number two, non-white people bragging about themselves to each other while existing in subjection to white supremacy. And number three, non-white people belittling each other, all the while existing in subjection to the white supremacists. That's all I could find in the Word Guide.
Much obliged, Mr. Demry, for you said that was racial show-offism, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Much obliged. Did you see showcase blacks in the Word Guide?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I specifically looked for it.
Okay. Racial showcasing, I think I could put my hand on it, or I think I could put my hand on audio of Mr. Fuller using the term racial showcasing. The challenge would still be out for showcase blacks. That is the one that because that's the one that's used in the book that I'm saying is inaccurate. Mr. Fuller has never used the term showcase black, and that's what I mean about the book being sloppy, and the black misandry, because that goes into exclusively attacking black males. Did other folks have comments while we're waiting? I think Red in Nevada might be checking as well.
I was checking too, and I saw the same thing that Mr. Demery Ford had saw, and then I also checked in the back of the glossary. I also have the 2010 word guide. I couldn't find it. I was also just trying to look up and see if he had just showcasing. I don't see that either. I see show your true color, stuff like that. So I could not find it either. And if I can wait, if anyone else wanted to share, I just had a few other things to share from the book. Thank you.
Spectacular. Like I said, this is not the main point. You can just do a search for racial showcasing, and racism, white supremacy, Mr. Fuller will pop up. You'll have audio segments aplenty with him using the term racial showcasing. That's why I said I wasn't really concerned about that. The key term, showcase blacks, that's the one that I'm saying he has never used. That's name calling. I asked him specifically, and he said that's why he would never use that term. That's one of the key reasons why I've said what I've said about the text. Other folks who dialed in who have commentary. Or if Red in Nevada. Yes, sir. We heard you, our caller in Chicago. Yes, sir, we heard you. I was going to just say, Red, I guess if you want to go ahead and share your other thoughts, and then we can get our caller in Chicago.
If the caller in Chicago hasn't called, I can wait. Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick question, Gus. Has Pam divulged any information about the other?
You said, has Pam divulged any information about the other authors? Was that the question?
Yes.
From years, all I can recall, I think that these were all black authors. I think she said that on the program, I believe, and that some of them didn't want to be identified for, whatever reasons, their job, that sort of thing. I think she discussed that on the program. I don't remember too much other identifying information that they might have been somehow linked to entertainment loosely, at least one or two of the individuals, but very, very little information, very little identifying information. And I did want to say one thing quickly. The female caller who talked about being forgiving and all of that, I do not know if Pam has different views or would have different views if we talk to her now. I don't know that. I can only go by what's in the text, and the fact that this black misandry is repeated in the books. When I see things repeated where this is not just a one-time thing, this is happening repeatedly and in major publications, the evidence I would suggest leans towards maybe she had consistent views in this manner. I don't know. But evaluating the text, there's so much of this content, the name calling, and just totally contradicting this message of forgiving and empathy and patience. All I can do is point out what I've seen repeatedly for 45 chapters. And again, I have been equally stunned by the text because it's so flagrant. Like I said, it's referencing black males as niggers. I mean, I don't know what more you would need. I mean, it's tons more there, but I have been equally surprised by the response of the listeners, because I cannot imagine if we were reading something and it was talking this way about black females. I cannot imagine folks calling in and saying, why do we need to point out that this is anti-black female? And the vigorous defense that has been required to something that is it's flagrant. It has been, I have learned a lot. Black misandry is I greatly underestimated the intensity of black misandry. The next book, The Man Not, Dr. Curry. In fact, I emailed him. I said, you have got to read this book. In fact, you should read the book and you should listen to the book club. This is incredible. And I asked his permission to read the book and he joyously agreed. Next book, The Man Not, Dr. Curry. We are reading back-to-back books that have shout outs to the cows. We should be as merciless in reading that book as Gus T has been in reading this book and all future books. Just because this is and we actually have someone that we can critique. If we run into problems, we can ask questions and get them on the program. So we should be ready to roll for next Thursday. Other folks have commentary that they wanted to share. Red, did you want to share your thoughts now?
Yes, thank you. One second. Okay. So the other point that I had from chapter 45, sorry, I had it in front of me. Just going back to the blame game part, it seemed like I remember specifically reading the part about the blame game and how black females blame black males for the spread of AIDS. And then maybe this kind of lends to, I think, Henry, who was talking about how maybe the book was written by different people, or different chapters were written by different people. And because it says in chapter 45, it talks about, there's no accident that black ex-felons infected with AIDS, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis C are deliberately released back into the black community, and then it kind of goes on from there. And so I thought that was interesting, where it does not, these are like kind of subtle things, but then like, if you, somebody maybe who maybe glanced over the blame game part or whatever, if you read this, it almost makes you think, well, lots of black males have been unfortunately kidnapped by the prison industrial complex. If they're released, then it kind of gives it can make you prejudiced towards them, and almost make it seem, as you can assume, also, playing back into that blame game. So I thought that part was interesting. The other situation, and I know there was, when I was reading the 33, I think it was the 33 rules of disengagement. I accidentally said 33 twice, but like for 30, I think it was 31. Understand. It was 31 actually. Understand that a politician is a politician is a politician. Actually, that the first couple, and that's actually the whole politics portion. That's again where she uses this, or someone uses to showcase blacks. It just seems like, it says we need to hold black politicians to a higher standard. And I agree with someone else how they said, you have to hold everyone to a higher standard. And even at this point, it seems like when I watch the political commercials now, they even bring up the fact where it's like, at least in Nevada, black people aren't even a demographic that they even really care about. It's, the quote-unquote Latinos. But it's kind of like you should be holding everyone to some quote-unquote higher standard. And then that even goes back to kind of holding accountable. And I remember Mr. Fuller, I remember hearing commentary about Mr. Fuller talking about how do you then hold someone accountable? What does that mean? So I thought that was also interesting. It kind of, there's these different points within the book. Well, how does this, what then do you do? Understand, I also, definitely appreciate the parts about the non-participation, which is something that I try to do, but there's just points of, how do you then do this? What is the highest possible standard? What can we demand? I do kind of understand the whole, I kind of can agree with, pulling your money together. If you can go out and buy different expensive things, instead of going out and buying those expensive things, maybe buying something, cheaper, and then you can then save your money, collect it amongst a group. Hopefully you have some type of camaraderie or what have you with that group of black people, non-white people. I think that would be my definition of pulling your money together. I was actually also trying to look up the definition of black misandry. All I could find was there's a website. It says journals.sage, like the spice pub.com. It says it's under this, the title is Racial Crimes and Black Misandry on Historical White Campuses Towards Critical Race Accountability and Educational Administration, written by a couple of different people. It was published back in 2007. And basically there's only one sentence. It says black misandry refers to an exaggerated pathological aversion toward black men created and reinforced in societal, institutional, and individual ideologies, practices, and behaviors. This one does not reference exactly hatred per se, but, just something, an aversion, adversarial thought. And then again, back to the karma. I don't understand that part at all. That was basically the second to the last page. This God force, this karma, I understand, Mr. Fuller's definition of universal man, universal woman, but there's no explanation of karma either. And with everything that these racist people are doing, I hardly think that the dog food epidemic is enough karma for what has been done over the centuries. That's well in my commentary. Thank you.
Much obliged. Before I get the caller, last four digits 3098. Being precise with words, that's been a major critique that I've had of this book, that it's very sloppy with words, and that is something that we should strive to work against as attempted counter-racists. I think Mr. Fuller, Dr. Welsing, Dr. Cambine, many of the folks that we esteem that are referenced in this here book would say, yes, let's try to be as precise, as accurate with terms as we can, especially if there are going to be accusations made. Nobody said Pamela Harris was guilty of anything, black misandry, black hatred, any of the above. I think what's been said consistently, though, is that this text is rife with black misandry. Either that is or is not. The person who dialed in at 3098, did you have commentary?
Yes, I do. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Gus. I'd like to point out, like I said, that you're looking for a specific point where Mr. Fuller points out racial showcases. If you go to his the compensatory contradicted code on page 28, 29, all the way to maybe 32, it's a whole section of racial showcase and confusion where he defines it and gives examples of that.
Oh, wow. Is it possible? Now, I'm sorry for interrupting you. It's too much to ask you to read 3 pages, I think, but maybe if you could just read, you have the book, so you stop when you feel like it. Definitely don't read the whole 3 pages, and in fact, don't even read the first page and a half. You can stop whenever you feel like it. If you just want to read one paragraph, but just read enough of it so that we can get a feel for what he writes about racial showcasing.
Okay, no problem. So starting on page 28, it's section 4, racial showcasing computing. This applies to the white supremacists, racists, taking large numbers of non-white people and putting them out front in quotation. Many non-white people may be able to showcase the places where they reside. They may be able to showcase their knowledge and expertise. The white supremacists, racist man and racist woman sometimes allow for some or many non-white people to have so-called titles of importance. They allow some or many non-white people to possess, use, or be associated, in quotation, with many comfortable and attractive material things, houses, garments, glittery stones or metals, exotic food and drinks, expensive vehicles, etc. The white supremacists sometimes give some or many non-white people numerous awards, congratulations, celebrations, parades, and many words of praise. Many non-white people sometimes see many other non-white people receiving and enjoying many things that provide great comfort that is provided by the white supremacists. Such actions by the white supremacists usually cause many or most, in parentheses, non-white people to become very confused. The white supremacists deliberately and skillfully use this confusion in order to produce the illusion that the system of white supremacy, racism, no longer exists, if it ever did. Like I said, it goes on for quite quite so many pages, at least from 28 to, matter of fact, 32. 28 to 32 in the compensatory countermeasures code.
Awesome, sir. Thank you so much for sharing and fulfilling my request. I really appreciate it. Did you want to share the rest of your thoughts?
Yes, I did. I have a question. I think you might have covered it already, but given the inaccuracy of the book, do you believe this book text can be redeemed? Have we been able to speak with Pamela and the co-authors and give her the actual updated data or information? Could it be redeemed?
I would.
That she had re-edited. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Given that she had re-edited the previous text.
Based on the conversation, I did talk with Pam about my views that I felt that there was some anti-black male bias in the text explicitly. And based on that conversation, I don't think so. I mean, it would require like substantial like it would be way more than just, oh yeah, David Walker was not a slave. Like substantial. I mean, I don't know. The Black Misandry is almost structured into how the book is presented. People have talked about both of the narratives at the beginning and the end of the book, the narratives all in between, about Rufus, even his name and the way that he's presented. So much of it would be, yeah, I don't think so. And it was not like when I said, oh, there's some anti-black male bias in your book. It's not like she was like, oh yeah, you're right, Gus. I'll think about that. That was not the case at all. So, and as I said before, in our 1.5 arguments about this or disagreements, she conceded that she is not logical on this subject area 8, sexual activity. So with that also being a factor, I would not have high expectations that the amount of revision that would be required. I'm saying this is the worst book I've ever read. The lack of evidence, it probably could not be redeemed to my taste. No.
Okay. May I ask another question?
Yes, sir.
All right. Actually, two quick questions. I think you touched on the intentionality of the text. I come to the conclusion that it was a good intention to produce in the book, but it was the best. It does produce further confusion in the system of refinement of white supremacy. How should we go about dealing with that? And my last question would be, would you consider this an act of crazy talk or stupid talk? I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Let's see. I'll take the second question. Wow. Do I consider it crazy talk or stupid talk? If folks were in the book club and we read Neil Postman, Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk, some months back, I think that was 2017, right before the flood. If my memory is correct, crazy talk tends to be many people having, total insane ideas or engaged in mistreatment, particularly incorrect behavior, but it tends to be group think. A lot of people, were in agreement with this. This seems like it's not just one person saying incorrect things. That tends to be more stupid talk, if I recall correctly. That is an individual maybe saying something in an incorrect manner that sounds illogical or insane, perhaps. This might be on the crazy talk side, if I recall correctly. Other folks, if you participated in that book club, if you have an assessment, feel free. To the first question, you said that you think this was a well-intentioned book that may unfortunately promote confusion. How do we go about addressing that? I think you just try to put out correct information. You could write a review. That was something Pam requested all the time. You could write a review that says just that. I think this was a well-intentioned text. However, there are some considerable problems, and you can maybe pick out some of the main, problems, inaccuracies in the text to, alert people. Other folks could do that as well. That's something that I plan to do because I do think that that's significant. And as I said, for me, that's a significant barometer. And I say it as many times as I like. We had a reader who found that I think the book that that our caller read from was available in 2011, and there are countless audio segments where Mr. Fuller discusses the concept of racial showcasing. It would have been easy if you can get a quote from Dennis Rodman to malign black males. Certainly, you can get an accurate quote from Neely Fuller Jr. and or the individuals who read and edited this book. When you go through and read and showcase blacks, oh, wait a minute, is that the term, Mr. Fuller? Showcase, but really? Where does he say that? And why don't we have a quote? If we can get a verbatim quote from Dennis Rodman, why can't we get an exact quote from Mr. Fuller? We just got that. I made a 30-second request. Bam, I don't even have the book. And I got a quote in 30 seconds. I could have wrote that down and I'd be good to go. You're telling me you couldn't do that in a book? It generally takes months, if not years, to get a book. You're telling me in 7 months and edits and re-edits and revisions, nobody stopped to check to say, oh, wait a minute, does he say showcase blacks? Nobody stopped to say, let's get a hard quote here from Mr. Fuller since we revere him so much and have him in the introduction. Let's get the exact quote so that he is not misunderstood, so that we're not contributing to confusion. Other folks have commentary that they wanted to share.
Ivy here.
Ivy? Yes, ma'am.
If you go to dictionary.com, the first definition that pops up for misandry is hate of hate of males. We do pool our resources. We're actually the second employer of black people next to the government. And the only reason why they lead is because the terrorists won't let us have enough businesses to be leading in that category. There was a statement about this emphasis on black men having tattoos. Well, white males have it more, and black females have them as well. There was stated that white people date who they don't like. They marry who they don't like. That's not true. They're not marrying. They're marrying black males. It's not about that the person that they're married to, that they don't like them. That's not what racism is about at all. That statement about let your hair down. When he told her that to let her hair down, and she replied, "Well, you let yours down as well," because he was bald. That was so non-constructive, that response, and even that anecdote. It was just put there just to trash him. And ultimately, there's nothing wrong with him with a man saying, that they want us to have long hair. We should grow our real hair, and that's what ultimately they're saying, and that's something that we should do. That's a matter of taking care of it and everything else. And they. Men, they make statements about, us having weaves and things like that. They don't prefer that, but they do prefer for our hair to be long, and that's what we're supposed to have. That's the way, the Creator made us. He made us for our hair to grow longer. The only reason why it doesn't is because it breaks a lot. It grows, it just breaks a lot. So he's just asking us to take care of our hair. There's nothing wrong with that. As far as certain people being rewarded for denigrating us, everybody is rewarded for that. Saying something about black men are rewarded for denigrating us, everybody's rewarded for that. There's a statement about white people don't tolerate mistreatment, so why should we? Well, we do that because we're in a weak position. It's a lie that white people are only attracted to dark-skinned black males and black women and black men. That's not true. They're attracted to all of us. White infertility is no crisis. That was stated as a crisis. The 13 reasons for so-called interracial relationships. A black man was called out specifically. You mentioned that, Gus, where it was said something about worshiping white women or something like that. But black women, we weren't called out specifically. It was as if we don't even have so-called we don't have sex with white people. There was a statement about having compassion for white supremacists. Why would I do that? Why would any of us have compassion for terrorists? Excuse me. Again, 70% of children are in single-parent homes. Black children, that's a lie. It's 50% at best. There's, like you mentioned before, more Asians have sex with white people than we do. So there's no unity there as far as having sex with white people. Their economy is better than us because of the white supremacists who allow them to have resources that they don't allow us to have to keep them from joining us to stop white supremacy. And that's the same for all other non-white people that are allowed to have more resources than us. Also, there's this terrible anecdote that you keep bringing up about black men being called niggers. There was no tacky anecdotes about black women who are in tragic arrangements. White people are lying about AIDS. Most people with AIDS are white because most people with AIDS are sodomizers, and most sodomizers are white. And there was this laundry list of parental obligations about when there was that tacky anecdote about the black man who was with the non-white person and saying, you know, we wiped his behind and we took him to school and this, that, and the other. I mean, these are things you're supposed to do as a parent, just like you said in a book not too long ago. Children didn't ask to be here. And also, you're talking about marching for black men. You're not marching for black men. You're marching for black people because you know that everybody is vulnerable to being murdered, men more, but black people in general. And that's the reason you out there marching. If you wasn't vulnerable, you probably wouldn't be out there marching. And another thing that, you know, the whole thing is that there's just, black men are just savages and, you know, don't want black women. Well, what I'm trying to figure out is if that's the case, what am I supposed to do with them? Like if they don't want me and they're just savages, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just be single or become a homosexual or date a white male? I mean, what am I supposed to do? I mean, there's just these lies about black men. You're not telling me what I'm supposed to do. I mean, you saying at the end I'm supposed to do this, that, and the other and be with them and this and that, but not the way you went on all this time about this book. And I'll say this as well. I'm the one who said that this book was very calculating and malicious in its attack on black men. As I said, they use surgical precision with their words. They call black women who are in tragic arrangements naive, call black men ever eager and feverish and all this and that. That doesn't happen by accident. Neither does going on for 40 chapters trashing black men. That doesn't happen by accident. Also, the last couple of things I'll say is that as far as the misandry is concerned, if you do listen to Pam on the program, for the most part, you won't know that because she didn't do a lot of the stuff that she did in the book. And when I don't have any of the books. So when I heard this audio on this book, I was completely shocked about the stuff that was in it, as well as some stuff that I know from some excerpts from the interracial con game. And in order for you to, I guess, write a book that has hatred for black men in it, that doesn't mean that you hate them. That could mean that you're angry. It could be a lot of reasons for that. As far as whether or not Pam was this way, I would say that she was, because I heard programs where she, how can I put this, where she, like there's one, for an example, from 2012, where the subject of black women being homosexuals, where that came up, and she just launched into this tirade about 15 million reasons as to why that's black men's fault. And that's ultimately how she was. Just like she said, she was not objective when it came to how she would talk about black women and how she would talk about black men. She would talk about black women as innocent bystanders, as the codified software developer said, and talk about black men as just these perpetrators. And I've heard a lot of commentary about that with her, and it would frustrate me. That said, I still miss her, and she had a lot of wisdom to share, but that is a flaw that she has. She did not have any objectivity when it came to this. And also, the last thing I guess that I wanted to say is that she made a statement when Renethia Tate was on the program. She said that people treat you as though you treat black women as though they're damaged goods once they have an arrangement with a white male. And she said, I'm going to speak for myself. And I'm thinking, well, do you mean that you was in one? Or are you talking about what you have observed people treat your sisters like because they were all married to, or at least most or all of them was married to white men, and so, or white males. And so that's what I wanted to ask, because if she was in a tragic arrangement, that would actually explain a lot of things, because what I've heard from people who are in tragic arrangements, they try to justify the fact that they have been in one by blaming the opposite sex. So if black men have been, if black women were with white males, they just trash. They trash black males, and if black men were with white females, they just trash black women. And it seems to be just this. What they're trying to do is they're trying to justify why they were in that tragic arrangement, because they feel like they did something wrong, and so to try to justify it, they just trash the other person and say, or trash the opposite sex and say, well, it's your fault, it's black men's fault or black women's fault that we get into these arrangements or whatever. And so the last thing I just wanted to ask Gus, like, when she said that she was speaking from personal experience, that people treat black women as though they are damaged goods once they've been with white males, and she said she was speaking for herself. Was she saying that she's been in a tragic arrangement, or was she saying that she's speaking for herself in terms of what she has observed from other people? And I'll mute my line. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gus. And everybody have as great a weekend as possible. I'll mute my line.
Yes, ma'am. I did not ask her that question directly, so I can't say that, yeah, we talked about this, or she confessed or admitted, any such activity to me directly. However, I listened to I was there live when the program took place, and I thought the same thing, just based on what she said live. I mean, you can go, I played the audio segment for the book club. The first time Renethia Tate was on the program, that was 2012, like autumn 2000, but this time, 2012. But I thought the same thing, that she might have been, talking about her own experience. That's just, just following what she said. That may or may not be true. I don't know. I can't speak to that. Folks can definitely go back and listen to the audio, but it sounded reasonable to come to that conclusion from listening to the audio. If that was the case, it certainly could have had an impact. I would think it definitely would have had an impact on her thoughts and behavior. She did say that Renethia Tate's book resonated with her. I guess I'll conclude with that. She did say Renethia Tate's book resonated with her. Did other folks have commentary that they wanted to share?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I forgot one other thing. From the last chapter, again, under the 33 rules of disengagement, this one is under the subtext of save the children and the black family, which is kind of odd. Under 28, under the stop fussing and fighting with your children's mother or father, it's the third sentence in it, and I'm maybe having trouble understanding it or what have you, but it says, we made the decision to have them or didn't make the right decision to not have them. So under this same text where it says save the children, that from that portion, or didn't make the right decision to not have them, it kind of makes it seem as if it's okay with aborting, I'm assuming, these black children. Then how are you going to save the children if you're going to abort them? And this is all in the book of, Black Love is a Revolutionary Act. I don't know if anybody else caught that, or maybe, again, I'm misinterpreting. I would definitely, appreciate anyone's input on that. I'll mute my line there. Thank you.
When I heard that portion, I was just thinking maybe making a proactive decision that, hey, we're not going to have children. So, we're just going to, whatever that means, to make sure that doesn't happen. That's what I was thinking. My initial thought was not abortion. And I don't recall talking to Pam about that issue specifically to know her views on such a controversial topic, as they say. But I was just thinking, yeah, you could be, as Dr. Welsing say, you don't play around with sex. Just plan that, hey, we're not in the game of being parents, so we're not going to procreate. Be responsible. That's what I was thinking. Did other folks have thoughts on that passage?
I thought the same thing. I'll mute my line.
Okay. Any other questions, comments folks want to make sure they get in?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. Looking again at this one chapter, 38, My Kind of Sister. It's one of those chapters, I was mentioning in my first comment in regards to how these chapters are basically structured and the language that's used. I mean, I've noticed that this chapter uses a lot of foul language, including one of the subtitles where it says, do not be fooled by the Asian woman color of BS. And it's like, I'm not sure if any of the other subtitles in the other chapters have any, foul language in it. But, this is one of those ones that, definitely stands out. And it also, not only with the misquoting of Mr. Neely Fuller, but also these concepts that they have in here in regards to one of these subtitles. It says not the Asian, Hispanic, or white females, and basically it's kind of grouping, all of these people into one group, and that is not the concept of racism, white supremacy. It's white and it's non-white, and according to Dr. Welsing, the non-white people are the Asians and Hispanics and blacks. So this chapter has, a lot of, non-constructive or misconstructive or non-informational stuff that I don't even think that the person who wrote this chapter even read Mr. Fuller or Dr. Welsing's work. So, this was something that kind of stood out for me. So I'll mute my line.
One thing, I thank you so much for sharing that bit about the language, because that's why I said about the contradictions. That's why I said some of this is like I'm equally stunned. I think when Ivy, she said she hadn't read any of the books before, and reading this she was shocked. I have been shocked rereading this because it's been 7 years since I read it, and I've been equally shocked by the response of many of the callers. We are all still learning, so but it's been shocking because it's so flagrant. It's how can this be defended? It's all of this profanity, and then you come back at the end and say no cursing. You're flagrant. Anyway, in that chapter, My Kind of Sister, that's the chapter where the black male is called a little ass nigger. In that same chapter, this black male, as he's being castigated, it says at the beginning of it, he's the type of brother that looks like he would never be caught dead listening to Snoop Dogg, that he's so uncomfortable in his blackness. That's the way it's presented. He's so uncomfortable in his blackness that he wouldn't be caught dead listening to Snoop Dogg. Now, the same Snoop Dogg who had black females on dog leashes, that's the same Snoop Dogg that it's being presented that this black male is somehow not black, is not authentically black, or wants to disassociate from black, and black is represented as listening to Snoop Dogg. Now again, Pam didn't write every chapter. This is included as an anecdote. Maybe somebody else sent this in or wrote this in. However, this gets included. You are responsible because you put this. It's like you are co-signing on this. I'm sure people write all the time. Lots of people wrote Pam. She didn't put everybody's anecdote in the book. You're co-signing on this one. Why is that being co-signed on? Incidentally, I don't have any Snoop Dogg in my playlist either. So maybe, I'm trying to escape I'm not comfortable in my blacklist. Maybe I got the fever. Any other folks who dialed in who had commentary that they wanted to share?
Yes, have you heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, another interesting thing that in the strategies, the 13 counter warfare strategies, strategy number 8, where it's a black man's constructive, self-respecting conduct code for white females, maintaining a psychological distance. And she goes on, I guess this is what some black male had come up with, that he would avoid unnecessary contact with them, avoid unnecessary communication with them, and avoid reckless eyeballing or even noticing a female visually, and to refrain from complimenting a white female in any way unless it is for a constructive purpose, and then especially in the area of sex. So I guess refrain from complimenting a white female, especially in the area of sex. I'll mute my line on it.
Don't know what to do if you have the fever. I guess, pray. Any other folks have comments? We actually have Pam gave insight on the code that was just referenced from Black Megatroid. I have an audio segment that we will give Pamela Evans Harris the last word. Any other comments, questions anyone wanted to share? Anybody find Showcase Blacks? If you can find that in any of Mr. Fuller's works, audio segments, please email it to me immediately. You really should, speak up immediately if you can locate that so that I can, stand in shame. But any other comments, questions?
Gus, quickly.
Yes, sir.
In that same chapter, all right, she says Asian females who have never walked the picket line, et cetera, or got called a nigger in her face or behind her back. I think I mentioned this before. My mother is Filipino, and a long time ago she drove into a white neighborhood and they spray painted nigger on her car. I'll leave my line.
Global system of racism, white supremacy. I thought that as well when it said white Americans, because I just don't use that type of language. When I say whites, I mean whites, whether they are in Australia, the part of the world known as Australia, the part of the world known as New Zealand, the part of the world known as France, Canada, Argentina, wherever they happen to be. If they're classified as white, I expect them to be practicing racism. White supremacy is not just an American problem. Just words are very important. Any other comments, questions?
Have you heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Just real quick, just a couple things I forgot in terms of Pam's commentary. Someone on YouTube said that they got into an argument with her about her mentality that where she just put all of the blame, or she put all of the blame of tragic arrangements with black women. She put it all on white people, but when it came to black men, she put it on the black men. And also, Mr. Demery Ford said that he got into an argument with her. He just asked her a simple question, like, why do black women like white males? And he shouted her down and things of that nature. So she definitely had that mentality. But that being said, about the forgiveness and all of that, just because you ultimately, the purpose of a book club is to speak on a book. And if that's the terrible content, and it is horrendous, the content in this book, it is, oh my goodness. If that's how it is, then, I mean, ultimately we either have to lie or just shut the book club down, period, and just shut the book down completely, because in my view, from my observation, 99.9% of this book, if not more, was trashing black men. So just because you are honest about the content of this book, that doesn't mean that you are personally attacking her or personally attacking the authors or not forgiving them or anything like that. If anything, you are attacking their arguments, and they need to be, because they're lies and they are abusive. I guess I'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gus.
Much obliged, Ivy. Any other comments, questions folks need to get in? Grand. We will get the audio clip. So the book club shifting to Thursday. Dr. Tommy Curry, the man nut. He does use hatred in his definition for black misandry. And incidentally, even if I did want to use the word hatred, it would apply given the content of this book. I'm just making a point because that word specifically was not used. But Dr. Curry does use it in The Man Knot. Starting next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll see if maybe we can borrow him for a segment or two to comment as we roll. That book I read last summer, and I do remember enjoying it thoroughly. Looking forward to doing the read starting next week. Incidentally, the only other comment I will get in, the black misandry aside, which is substantial, that is, not to be minimized, disregarded at all. And again, I have a hard time, I would be real curious if we had just read a book that had this level of anti-black black female content, if we would have had this many people who had, an issue or even agreed with the content, because he had a number of people, males and females, who agreed with this content initially until, some more probing was done. But I'd be very curious. Anywho, the audio segment will be here tomorrow for the compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We will catch, wow, what a week it has been with the explosions, the arrests. There was an incident in Tennessee where a white man went and killed 2 black people, 1 female, 1 male, got into a gun battle and said, whites don't kill whites. He was taken into custody. This happened in Kentucky. Just within the past few days, I said that should be connected with compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Final word to Pamela Harris. This is Pam talking about this book specifically and the segment Black Megatroid, where he talked about this code, no reckless eyeballing, and how he conducts himself with fitting. I'll make sure I get that in. That's what should be the cover of this book. It should not be a black male and a black female, because I did not get that from this book at all. Black males and black females, like being together in a loving manner, like that is not, I think that takes up maybe 2% of the book. Most of the book is about feverish. That's what should be on the cover. Like the sound clip, Black Megatroid, Pamela Harris on the cows. We will give her the final word for the broadcast. So, you can just imagine. Thanks for tuning in. Context to White Supremacy signing out after the segment concludes. Thanks, everyone. I hope it was worthy of your Friday evening.
This is person goes by the handle Black Megatroid. He wrote this in 2010. Again, I think this person might listen to the program. I recognize the handle. But yeah, that's some thoughts on a counter-racist code for dealing with white females. Why did you include this in the latest book, Pam?
Well, for the record, I did ask his permission, and he gave it to use it in the book. I used it because because if we're going to maintain a psychological distance, then we have to put some thought into it, and we have to have a strategy and have codified response. In other words, you have to think ahead of time. If I'm in this situation, or if a situation repeats itself, what is going to be my response? And one reason that we put it in the book was I realized a long time ago, I just didn't understand that it was a code, that this is what white men do all the time. And I don't know if sisters will agree to this or not, but I'm sure some will, is that the same thing that Megatroid does, white men do all the time. For example, what we did was we went further, and after his code of conduct, we put down the white male's code of conduct for non-white females to maintain white supremacy. And basically, we just took what he said and converted it, or codified it as a white male response. And I just read this one line rather than read the whole thing. When a man ignores a woman's femininity, it's like taking away their rights or powers as a woman, which means they can't function as a female, and they may doubt their femininity because it's important that non-white females believe they are inferior to white females. Another reason is to reduce the chance that I can be emotionally seduced by a non-white male and be manipulated or fooled, which means a loss for me as a white man, the white race, and the system of white supremacy. Another reason is to ensure that whites are taken seriously and to ensure the most advantageous position possible for whites. So by doing so, the white male maintains the most power in their situation, since the non-white female will always accept her inferior status when you treat her like she has a penis instead of a vagina and 2 breasts. All of this equals to power and actually empowers white females when they are made aware of what we white males are doing. They love it, which means I love it. So basically, and then it ends with, there are a minority of white males who sex and marry non-whites, but this still maintains the system of white supremacy because these white males usually get the pick of the black and non-white litter, which neutralizes these females and stops them from reproducing with other non-white males. Think of it as my suggestion is one way to counter the browning of America, white America, and the destruction of white supremacy. So I can speak from personal experience
the way that white men act around black women, for the most part. They, many times ignore your femininity. Many times they will never compliment you in front of a white female, very seldom. They will never show a decided interest in you in front of a white female. In other words, they will maintain that white female's position in the hierarchy of white supremacy society. So I'm sure a lot of sisters can testify to white males approaching them when nobody's around, being sneaky, being underhanded, basically just being sneaky. Like many women have testified, but have said that when they go online, regardless of what their purpose is, particularly if it's something that has to do with dating, white men come out the droves, and their orientation is sexual. So they will, right there in front of white people, they'll act like you don't exist. But when there's nobody white around or anybody that they know around, their behavior changes because they're maintaining that code of white supremacy, and that mandates that the white female always be superior. And I'll give you another example. You got Robert De Niro, for example. He's a white male actor. He's married 2 different black women. Well, Robert De Niro doesn't get in a movie and make the black woman the centerpiece of his movies. He's always, for the most part, I think it's only one movie he played in, to my knowledge, where he had a black female as any kind of interest.
The Score.
Okay. But for the most part, Robert De Niro was with white women in front of that screen. Robert De Niro does not give interviews about why he doesn't date white women. He adheres to the code, even though he sexes and marries black women. He does nothing publicly to make you think that he's putting them above a white female. So I'm just saying the black women, they're trying to fool us. They're putting all this interracial stuff out there. They got some new show about single ladies or something. And notice that it's a comedy. So you never have a black show that's not a comedy, for obvious reasons. So we don't take ourselves seriously. But this show got one racially ambiguous black female and one very light-skinned black female and a white female. And, of course, the white female is having sex with black men. And the racially ambiguous black female is, I guess, I didn't watch it. I just saw the commercials and stuff. I refused to watch it. But I'm assuming that this racially ambiguous black female is going to be having sex with white men. So they're pushing that out there because they know when you have that kind of behavior, you can't have a code. You can't have any constructive behavior because you're too confused and you're too divided. So I would just say that what Murgatroyd is talking about, white men have been doing it for 500 years. If you watch these TV shows and movies, whenever the white male is involved with a non-white female, she's always chasing him. She's always trying to seduce him. She's always eyeballing him. But he doesn't eyeball her. Many times he acts like he's not even interested, maintaining the code. What he does behind closed doors, he tries to keep behind closed doors. And don't be fooled, sisters, by the handful or the small number that marry and date us. It still maintains white supremacy because there's a lot of genetic reasons that they're doing it. But I just find it interesting that they've been doing this code for a long time, and I have noticed that white men, their behavior. I've seen white men see an attractive black woman and look upset. I don't know if it was because they were attracted to her and it goes against their code, or whether she looked better than the woman they got at home. I don't know what the reason is. But I've watched them be upset, visibly upset, when a sexually attractive black woman comes within their midst. Maybe it's a hidden desire, I don't know. But I don't take it as a compliment in any case. So I would just say, white people have been operating under a code for a very long time, and they teach us to do the opposite of what they do.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Mm-hmm. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.